Yo, Atlas speaking, and today I'm back with part 5 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a Prodigy Uzumaki. Let the tale begin. Chapter 23. I resigned myself to no sleep for the night as I pored over the files on all the genin the Hokage had left me. It was the Hokage's version of each and every genin stationed in the village. When I returned to the auditorium after 3 hours of clearing the house I was planning for my base of operations, the ANBU dropped a note scolding me for leaving sensitive documents in the open. Luckily, that same ANBU has stayed to watch the room. I started with the dozen genin that were not placed with a specific group before moving on to the group about to head on duty. While I organized the papers for better access, I found several stacks of paper with common, genin-level tasks that periodically needed done. Towards beneath those stacks were other, smaller stacks of tasks that were a bit above genin level but still needed to be done. The logistics required was a complete nightmare and my feet ached from standing. As the genin started to file in, I made note of where I stopped and what I needed to say for the meeting. Thankfully, they were all mostly awake. Shinobi technically weren't supposed to keep any kind of schedule and they seemed to be doing a decent job of it. At 0150, I turned around to face them. Group 1 is on shift. I proceeded to list 3 exchanges between the genin without a group and those with. The 3 temporarily moved out of Group 1, you're helping me carry all these papers to a more secure location. Namake's Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, I want you to put security seals around the location, full strength. Does anyone else have knowledge of advanced Fuinjutsu? No one raised their hands, so I moved on. The enrollment list of academy students is pinned on that wall. I pointed at the wall I pinned the list to. Group 3 and those who do not have an assigned task, I want you to pick 2 or 3 names off the list, initial beside them, and bring the academy students here at 0900. Any questions? Who are you? Where's the Hokage? I'm Uzumaki Kichiro and the Hokage has left to fight. I'm in charge, and unless I say so, you only answer to me. Clear? Clear, several people echoed. What happens if we can't find the students? You're genin, it shouldn't be a problem to find a few children in your own village, so get it done, you have 6 hours. But. No buts. Any other questions? How old are you? 9. Any relevant questions concerning orders or operations? Did the daimyo really threaten you and your clan? The daimyo has removed himself from the shinobi hierarchy of this village and the contents of my conversation with him are confidential. Section A of the shinobi. I know what Section A says about threats made to superior officers. The situation has been resolved and the contents have been declared confidential. What does Section A say? The Shinobi Code of Conduct can be found on the first shelf of the Public Records Building or available through any Academy student. Group 1, you have 4 minutes to report to the village wall. Those who are helping me, come on the platform, everyone else, you know your jobs. Those of you picking up Academy students, please wait until morning to contact them. It only took 5 minutes and 2 scuffles for the academy names to be chosen and the genin to file out. During that time, I stacked the papers into 3 manageable piles and loaded up my impromptu pack mules. Are you ready? I asked. They nodded and we set off. On the way there, my 2 dear little siblings did an impressive job of leading like overly proud peacocks, not that I had ever heard of a peacock here and could tell them so. I suppose they wanted to show off how competent they were, especially since I had kicked Minato's ass so soundly 2 months before and they'd been emotional, and possibly hormonal, reeks ever since. In the main room of the house I chose for headquarters, old, if serviceable couches had been pushed up against the walls. Before I left after clearing the place of dangerous traps, I had dragged a solid, wood table in from the dining room, as well as the chairs. My pack mule genin dumped the papers on the table and left as fast as they could. I didn't stop them. Minato, Kushina, I need this room sealed so that no one can get inside without my permission. Around the house, you don't need seals that intense, but I still don't want anyone to have access without my knowledge. Make sure the ceiling and floor are covered as well and the roof is reinforced. Any questions? They looked a bit disappointed as they shook their heads. I thought you wanted us to make cool seals, Minato complained. We can do this with regular seals. Lead it to the two seal freaks to consider security seals on par with the ones around the Hokage's office to be mundane. Yet, it made sense. The little bit I had been able to learn about other sealing styles indicated that they needed several seals to accomplish what one Uzumaki seal could do, which was one of the reasons the other village's Jinchuriki seals ended up significantly weaker than the Uzumaki seals. Minato and Kushina had learned the Uzumaki style, so they got about half the entertainment out of seal requests than a normal seal master would receive. Not that either of them had the discipline to become true masters. They were too easily distracted by more interesting seals and had no one to make them muddle through the nuances of the art. You're welcome to try and figure out something better on your own time, but I need this place secured quickly so I can try and get a little bit of rest tonight. They scurried out while I pulled up a chair to continue going through the files. I sent a quick thanks to Sakumo for drilling me until I developed a near photographic memory. I could absorb a lot of knowledge at once, even though my comprehension was almost non-existent. It was perfect for memorizing profiles. 20 minutes later, Minato and Kushina returned, their arms filled with paper. You need to activate the seals, Minato said as they started to plaster them on the walls. I complied and in short order, the room was almost perfectly secure. It would take a Kage to get through them without blasting the place to smithereens. A few minutes later, the repurposed training ground had basic security keyed directly to me. I sent the genin to rest, avoiding promises to do the same. Even though I had technically only been a leader for less than 7 hours, I hated it more than anything else. Not that it was particularly hard work, but because I didn't know the people I was leading well enough to be confident in my allocation of skill sets, and thus, most of the responsibility to get things done would fall to me until I figured it out. Paper statistics were great, but there just wasn't a scale to judge adaptability, independence, problem-solving, and motivation. My rant to the Hokage upon his return began to compose itself in the back of my mind. I was still considered young enough to throw a temper tantrum, right? No wonder kids were so carefree, they could cry, and scream, or rage when something displeased them, and whether or not the displeasure persisted, they undoubtedly made their point known to the world, where adults had to keep it all politely bottled up inside. I finished memorizing genin profiles shortly before sunrise, giving me a little more than 2 hours of rest before I had to meet with the academy students. I stuck to the darkest of shadows and hurried to the house I had taken to calling the Uzumaki clan compound. In my opinion, it was a nice house. It was reasonably close to the hospital. Any one of the young children of the clan could safely remember and make the trip if needed. The Yamanaka compound was across the street, and since a respectable portion of the clan was civilian and the shinobi were all fighting, they were welcoming of their new neighbors across the street and doted on the children. The house itself was almost excessively large, if simple, but the ridiculous thickness of the wooden walls as well as the fact that the roof was solid wood, except for the tiles protecting it from rotting, made me suspect that it had been built by the Shodai, at least the outside had been. There were 3 levels and I automatically claimed the top room as shinobi only. While the outside frame was perfectly sound, the inside was a mess. The circular staircase had been so decrepit that I had to rescue the person trying to sell the house when he stepped on it and fell through. And kept falling from the 2nd floor to the basement, where I had caught him before he broke his neck and informed him I'd take the house while I healed the contusions. Fuso and ISE were a bit dismayed when I proudly showed the newly bought house to them, and they took in the walls that couldn't be considered walls due to the amount of damage they somehow obtained. When I explained my plan to get the inside of the house and rebuild the walls however they wanted, the horror turned into skepticism and they agreed that the space was good enough for the 7 Uzumaki children they wanted to finish raising. The next day, I brought Minato and Kushina there and worked them to exhaustion cleaning the place up, without telling them what it was for, no matter how much they pleaded with me. 28 hours of constant work later, the house was cleared of all debris and scrubbed until it sparkled. 4 rooms were built on one side of the house and fully furnished, a kitchen, dining room with a massive table, a living room with plenty of seating, and a half bathroom with plumbing. Temporary dividers were propped against the walls to be arranged later. In an abnormally large lean-to attached to the back of the house, there was a real onsen. The water was disgusting and the place needed to be cleaned, but I could do that easily with a weak version of the only water jutsu I knew and could heat the water with another I saw Sakumo use when he was fed up with bathing in cold water on my tour of the bases. I was sure I could wrangle it out of him the next time I saw him, or break into his house and steal the scroll since he had so helpfully boasted where it was when he thought I wasn't listening. I returned Minato and Kushina back to Minato's apartment before going back and setting up a sturdy fence around the missing staircase to block access to the basement and upper floors until I found time to properly finish the remainder of the house. Fuso and Ise moved in with Nagato the next day, and the day after, when they had managed to set up the rest of the floor for entertaining children, the rest of the orphans moved in, thrilled at the prospect of getting out of the overcrowded orphanage and into a place they could call their home and regaining guardians they were actually related to, who cared for them because they wanted to, not because it was just their job. The hospital worked out a scheduling for Ise and Fuso that made it so one of them, and often both, would always be there while the kids weren't in school. It took several days, but I had moved most of mine and Kushina's shinobi things from our apartment to the top floor of the house, and Ise sealed it up nicely so that unless someone had Uzumaki chakra or an Uzumaki guiding them, it was practically impenetrable. I noticed him add a bit to the seal that would tie it to him and let him know when I came and went, but didn't say anything. I knew a little about paranoid and worrying parents, so I indulged him. He had a decent understanding of how shinobi operated, so as long as he never told anyone the kind of information he had access to, there was no danger. Apparently, according to Uzumaki tradition, a clan kid wasn't considered an adult, or even able to consent to anything, until they reached Jonin or the age of 25. The day before the Hokage came to visit and signed me up for leadership, I had ducked out while Kushina and Minato took an impromptu nap. The Uzumaki children were attending the civilian school 2 blocks away, and Fuso and Ise had somehow managed to get the day to themselves. I stopped by the house to dump several weapons I had found squirreled away in Minato's apartment, blatantly breaking the no sharp or pointy objects allowed to the genin rule I imposed on the 2 of them. The top floor of the Uzumaki clan house automatically became one of my favorite places in the village, even though the amount of time I spent there was negligible and there was nothing but miscellaneous weapons and odd supplies scattered across the floor. I landed on the roof, perched atop the highest point, an ornate sphere Ise insisted I place there to mark the place as Uzumaki territory and to publicly announce that the clan still lived, mostly in the faint hope that any Uzumaki who survived the massacre by being outside the village would return when word got around to the other villages that Konoha had gained a potentially powerful clan. Apparently, any Uzumaki dwelling had the symbol. Kichiro's childhood memories weren't nearly detailed or attentive enough to confirm or deny the claim. It made a good spot to stand watch. I extended my senses to place the inhabitants of the house. Ise was the only person awake and moving. I guessed that he was making breakfast, or possibly lunches, but he might have been in the adjacent dining room fidgeting. I hadn't quite memorized the room placements. Fuso was absent, likely at the hospital on shift. The children were sleeping in what was probably supposed to be a neat line but ended up with several children facing the wrong direction or sideways, as well as the younger ones using their elders as pillows. A divider had been set up between the boys and girls. I probably could have mixed them all up with the vicarious kawarimi I used to mess with Sakumo, but I was too tired to enjoy the fallout of that little disruption. Minato and Kushina were there, surprisingly, but they slept on the second floor, which was probably a wise decision considering they could be called on at any time. I silently leapt from the peak of the roof to the eaves before shimmying down the wall and stopping outside the window to the room Ise was in. After confirming it was the kitchen, I opened the window with a trick that would have earned me a position as a first-rate thief in my old world. The security seals would have given me a nasty shock if I hadn't been an Uzumaki, but a burst of chakra disabled them long enough for me to silently slide inside. Ise visibly flinched and barely stifled an alarmed shout when he turned around to see me perched atop the faucet of the sink like an abnormally large bird. "It's Kichiro," I said softly before he could try anything with the paring knife clutched in his fist. Shinobi, right, he said and leaned against the counter weakly. Could you please make a little noise when you come in? I'm not too young to have my heart stop. Sorry, I guess not everyone is as freaky as Sakumo to know where I am at any given moment. Your perspective is a bit skewed. Most shinobi aren't anywhere near as good as Hatake-san. More importantly, there's talk of a temporary change in leadership of the village. Is that why you weren't at dinner like you promised? Both Kushina and Minato unexpectedly came, though they didn't know if they could talk about it. You haven't already gotten in trouble with whomever it is, have you? I shifted uncomfortably and leapt to the ground. Actually, I'm technically in charge. I didn't have the energy or the patience for the discussion that would stem from that statement. I haven't slept all night, so I only stopped by to let you know I was here. He accepted my deflection of the conversation without complaint, ruffling my hair. I'm sure you'll do great, kiddo. I grunted and took off. From the sharp pull on my scalp, I probably left a few hairs tangled around his fingers. Chapter 24. I noticed more than a little hero worship among the academy students crowded into the front rows of the auditorium. The Hokage never said anything about not being able to train the academy students and hopefully get a few of them up to genin level to alleviate some of the pressure on the genin stationed in the village. They were my guinea pig group. If I could manage to continue the education of the academy students, I could probably manage to continue the education of the genin, thus bolstering the capabilities of the genin force. I decided that the genin lingering in the back of the room would be good errand boys and girls. There had to be enough retired shinobi in the village capable of teaching 1 or 2 academy students how to fight and function as shinobi. The genin lingering in the back of the room who have forgotten their lessons on the necessity of compartmentalization can all go and find as many retired shinobi as they can and request their presence here at 1000. Do not be late for your own meeting. They all left, chastised. What's compartmentalization? One of the academy students asked. Compartmentalization is where one piece of information is given to one group and different piece of information is given to a different group so that no one has the entire chunk of information, and if one group gets caught and gives up their information, then they don't put all of the other groups in danger. I hope that was a simple enough explanation for a bunch of kids. Now, I'd like to inform you all that your education at the academy will continue for the time being. In your textbooks, there are suggested workout routines. You are to complete them to the best of your ability. You may choose your groups, but everyone is to have at least one partner. Any questions? Several hands shot into the air. I picked the closest. What about teachers? You want to be ninja, right? As a ninja, you will spend a good portion of your time training alone or with a small team, unless you are one of the very lucky ones and manage to find yourself someone to be apprenticed to. I pointed at another hand. Who will teach us to fight? The textbook doesn't have any jutsu. That has yet to be decided. You have to keep up the workout regime first. I pointed to someone else. Can we practice throwing kunai? Only as long as you're careful. If I hear or see anyone getting hurt, no matter the circumstances, the privilege will be taken away. I waved my hand at another. What if we already know some kata? Then teach it to the people you are working with. No sparring. Eventually, the question stopped. The academy training grounds are open for your use. I'm not going to tell you when to do the workout, but you will do it every day. Hopefully, a teacher of some kind will be assigned to you soon. I suggest you split into groups of 2 or 3 others who are at or around your strength and skill level. If there are any problems, ask a ninja to bring you to me. Frivolity and slacking will not be tolerated. If you do not wish to be a ninja any longer, hand in your resignation to me. Dismissed. Somehow, the questions had dragged on long enough for several genin early to their meeting to have peeked in the door. The academy students, thankfully, left quickly and the genin filed in as the stragglers hurried out. When they were settled, I started the next meeting. Group 2 is back on shift. I proceeded to list the two exchanges in their ranks. Have there been any notable incidents that could possibly become relevant in the future? There are a pair of bandits camping slightly less than 2 kilometers away from the west-northwest wall. Recommendation is that they be eliminated. 3 more people spoke up with the exact same situation. Has anyone confirmed that they are actually bandits and not shinobi? No one spoke up. Shit. Uzumaki, go get the barrier seals Yuzi used during wartime, all of them. The village is too big, Kushina protested. I cut her off. No, it's not, trust me. Go, now, and bring them back. She dashed out. Raise your hand if you know bare minimum of creating seals or using anything other than explosive tags. Minato raised his hand along with 2 others. Are you good enough to copy seals? They nodded uncertainly. All 3 of you report to me after this meeting. You're in group 2, right? They nodded and I quickly replaced them with 2 others from the reserves. The genin were beginning to look a little apprehensive. This is all just a precaution, I assured them. Have there been any other incidents or details I should know? 2 civilians working in the fields failed to report back last night. No search parties have been sent out. Has any investigation been made? The fields are too far out to send a genin patrol unit. Understood. No investigations. If the civilians return, detain them and notify me immediately. As for the bandits, I want the Hyuga twins and the Uchiha to report to me at the conclusion of this meeting. Is there anything else I need to know about? The daimyo has taken full control of the civilian sector of the village. Something he said has prompted several academy parents to attempt to take their children out of the academy program. I directed them to an empty classroom and said he'd meet them there in an hour. Good call, thank you. There was a small knot of them in the back corner muttering with their heads together. Is your conversation important enough to be shared? I asked them pointedly. They shifted uncomfortably, but one of Kunoichi stood up. Several parents of genin have insisted that we hand in our resignation. Is there a particular reason why? She shrugged. I think there's a smear campaign against you initiated by the daimyo. There is and always has been a minor smear campaign among the civilians against the Hokage and all ninja, I informed the room. This isn't a new problem, so I want you all to ignore it. You will walk away from confrontations, no matter what is said or done. Just because they are civilians doesn't mean they have no right to voice their opinions. If it becomes a problem at home, seek shelter at a comrade's house or clan compound. I had a good idea what the daimyo was attempting to do, and I hoped it didn't succeed. No matter what, I had to get to the academy students before he could. Group 3, I want you to find as many of the academy-age shinobi in training, especially the ones with civilian parents or staying with civilian family members, as you can and bring them to a training ground, any training ground. Teach them katas, how to throw kunai or shuriken, and E-rank jutsu, or even spar with them if you need to, just keep them away from the civilians and keep them happy. I know it sounds extremely manipulative, but Konoha can't afford to lose any potential shinobi, not now, and these kids are going to have to step up as soon as they're able to help you out. Group 3, dismissed. They all but ran out while Kushina fought her way inside. Group 2, I need you to pass on what happened in this meeting to Group 1 and tell them to get as much rest as they can, dismissed. If you did not receive an order, I want you to hinge into a civilian and find out what is being said. Do not bring attention to yourself and absolutely do not let anyone know you're a ninja. Meet me at the headquarters at noon to report and receive another assignment, dismissed. Only 7 other people remained in the room. I waved them forward and sat down on the edge of the platform. You 3, I pointed at the 2 Hyuga and the Uchiha. Can you get along for long enough to complete a mission? Considering the Hyuga were Hyuga, and the Uchiha was an Uchiha, I wasn't sure of my chances. They eyed each other warily. I've seen all 3 of your profiles, the full ones. You're all strong enough to be mid-level chunin right now, but your respective clans insisted that you remain in the village for several reasons, foremost among them to preserve bloodlines, correct? The three nodded at me, clearly not happy about the arrangements. Since I have far too many things to take care of right now, I need the three of you to work out some sort of camaraderie and a chain of command in the next 20 minutes before setting out to make sure the bandits are really bandits and not shinobi. Use the Byakugan to look at their chakra networks from as far away as you can. Do not engage. If you get even a whiff of a non-Konoha shinobi, hightail it out of there and report to me without delay. Absolutely no heroics, you are to gather information only. Save for myself, the three of you are probably the strongest combat shinobi in the village right now. I need all of you to be combat ready at all times. Dismissed. They left as the first of the retired nin trickled in and took a seat. I held out a hand to Kushina and she gave me a wooden tube filled with the seals I requested from her. I opened it and shuffled through the seals until I found the one I needed. That one isn't big or strong enough to surround the entire village. Kushina protested. Your best bet would be this one. That one can't keep out a determined academy student at the size it needs to be, I retorted. This one is the strongest, and if I put enough chakra in it, I can expand it even further than it was intended. You don't have that much chakra to safely. I'm at least twice as strong as anything you've ever seen me do, Kushina, and I have the Kyubi as backup. Put the rest of these seals back and then I need the four of you to each make a copy of the seal, just in case. Find somewhere to work where you won't be interrupted. Dismissed. They scurried out and I turned to the retired ninjas sitting on one side of the room, chatting. Is anyone else coming? I asked. Several shook their heads and I noted that there were more than 30 of them. So, kiddo, what do you want a bunch of old crippled guys for? One of them, who seemed to be missing half his face, asked. I need your help. We can't run patrols, Gaki, and your genin would be better off in a fight than most of us. One rolled their eyes and tapped his missing leg with a cane. I don't know what the Hokage was thinking when he left a bunch of toddlers as a defense. Another commented, quickly followed by a third. All of us retired for a damn good reason. I know! I insisted. But I can't handle everything that needs to be done. The handful of Chunin here all have their own jobs. I don't care what the Hokage thinks, less than 100 genin can't handle 8-hour shifts around the entire village perimeter for an indefinite period of time and assist inside the village, so I want to train the academy students to be able to step up and help out. In a few days, there's only going to be a dozen academy students left. It's not worth the resources to train them. You're too late to stop the civilian paranoia. I've seen it happen in every war since the time of the Shodai, a particularly old man said. You do know about the civilian paranoia, right? Yes, I know about it. As of right now, I'm pretty sure I can keep it away from the academy students and keep them mesmerized by the thought of being a ninja. You'll divide families that way, kid, are you sure? The old guy was apparently their spokesman. Unless you have another brilliant idea, I'd rather divide a few families than lose dozens of potential shinobi, screw over the ones we already have, and continue to weaken the military here. He was testing me, I was sure of it. What do you need from us, Uzumaki-chan? You all still remember what it was like to be a ninja and you all know the skills you needed the most in wartime. I need you to help teach the academy students and get them ready as fast as you possibly can. I can get you profiles to choose students from, and if all of you agree, there's enough of you that no one will have to take more than 2 students. A majority of you will only get 1. They all studied me and I belatedly realized that I was still sitting at the edge of the platform. How many students are in the academy? 49. Ages? I think the youngest are 5 and everyone above the age of 8 has already been included in the genin ranks. And what do we get for this? I don't know. I'm sure I can figure something out. What about the genin who are lagging behind their peers? I was going to see if this worked before I tried anything else. If this doesn't, I don't want to waste any more of your time or resources. You said you're already shielding the academy students from the paranoia? Yes, at least, I sent a bunch of genin to do what they can. I still need to try and talk down the academy students' parents. Did the Hokage tell you to do any of this? He barely told me anything but how to communicate with him and the Kiri front, to be nice to the daimyo, and a mission scroll that only said leave the village in the absence of the Hokage. They all went silent and completely, frighteningly still. I thought I had their attention before, but now, I doubted they would have noticed if a naked marching band stomped though while tuning their instruments. What's with the weird looks? I asked warily. The spell broke and they all started to murmur among themselves. You haven't. Of course he hasn't, he wasn't even born when Sandaime-sama was appointed. The rumors. Everyone knows the chances. No one would share rumors like that. He clearly doesn't know. Does that mean? It has to just be a precaution. It's practically a tradition. His teammate. Someone should tell the kid. Everyone's heard about the deaths. It explains a lot. He doesn't want it. He'll know if. He's only a child. It makes sense. Both the Shodai and the Nidaime. Someone grabbed my arm, dragged me out of the room, through a hallway I didn't even know existed, and stopped in a perfectly silent room. Calm down, Kichiro-kun, the ANBU crouched in front of me said. I automatically checked his chakra signature and relaxed the slightest bit when I realized it was the ANBU rat. What were they talking about? Why were they all so tense? What don't I know? I demanded and tried to storm out of the room. The ANBU pushed me back against the wall, a hand on my chest. None of it is applicable or relevant right now, calm down before you hurt yourself. He was right, my heart was pounding at ridiculous speeds, my breathing was irregular, and my limbs trembled. You have academy students to find teachers, angry parents of those students, many of the genin, and one of the chunin to talk down, a hate campaign to stop, a team gathering intel on potential enemies, and a last resort barrier seal in the making. Don't worry about the gossip of a bunch of retired men with too much time on their hands. He slowly released me and I slid down the wall rubbing my face. I can't fight a propaganda war with the daimyo, I told the ANBU. I don't have the time, I don't know these people well enough, and if the bandits are actually shinobi and they call in people to put the village under siege, it will make the civilian lives as much hell as shinobi lives with rations and shortages and curfews. Yes, you can, kid, you're not acting on your own. There are 3 ANBU here you can count on, genin willing to obey you, and all the civilian members of shinobi clans will support you because your strength is the best chance they have to see their loved ones again. That is a decent percentage of the population. That's no majority. I haven't even been in charge for 24 hours and I'm already in over my head. It just seems like it, Kichiro-kun. In less than 24 hours, you've figured out a way to make the Hyuga and Uchiha get along well enough to run a mission. Anyone will work with anyone under enough pressure. Besides, they're too young to be fully conditioned to be at odds with each other. You've earned the undying respect of teenage and preteen genin by doing something absolutely stupid and implying permission to act independently. Yeah, and that's probably going to come back to bite me. The daimyo wouldn't have started a campaign against you if he didn't consider you a threat to his base of power. He tried to subvert the genin this morning when they were running around on your errands. It failed miserably. I don't understand the significance. Rat rubbed the back of his neck. Figures you wouldn't understand exactly how much power you have. The daimyo, until now, has had such sway over the people, both shinobi and civilian, that not even the Hokage dared oppose him in any way. Not only that, but for the first time, someone other than him has a fingernail hold on his empire. He can't do anything about it until the Hokage returns and takes you out of a position of authority with an influx of more powerful troops loyal to the Hokage, and through him, loyal to the daimyo. The display the young Senju put on convinced him that the genin here are willing to kill for you and that you are willing and able to shield them from retribution. His troops could slaughter the genin here, but their age means he could be accused of slaughtering children. The Hokage indicated you are stronger than anyone suspected, and he has no way of knowing how his troops would stack up against you, nor does he know if the Hokage will take his side or yours, since you are technically acting independently of the Hokage rather than in his stead. And most likely, the Hokage will take my side since he put me in power and I'm the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The ANBU nodded. Did the Hokage plan this? He hoped you would provide enough of a smokescreen for Bird to infiltrate the daimyo's ranks and provide a stable line of information about his activities and intentions. Unfortunately, now he's paranoid about spies, making Bird's task impossible, but effectively defanged enough to make the mission unnecessary. The Hokage may not be as well liked as the daimyo, simply because of the nature of his work, but one thing that he has never been proven directly responsible for is the death of a child, an action the Shodai made political suicide. So now I have the most powerful person in the country gunning for my head, and possibly my family's as well, in order to get to me. Kichi. No, it's fine, I'll figure something out. Is there anything else I don't know that might be relevant in the near future? Not only are you a political threat to the daimyo, but you've gotten under his skin and made the fight personal. I didn't mean. Kid, you got under the Hokage's skin as well, whether you meant to or not. But that was intentional. And everyone has to deal with the fallout of their actions, intentional or not. Is he going to go after my family? If he kills one of them, he gives you the right to challenge him to a fight to the death. No matter how old you are, you're a shinobi and he only has basic training in the samurai arts, he can't win. But he can still take a hostage. Rat studied me. You don't know a lot about your clan history, do you? No, Kushina's the expert. Then here's a tidbit that you might want to be aware of. In the Land of Fire and the Land of Mist, there's an old superstition that kidnapping an Uzumaki equals self-destruction. In the time of the clan wars, several clans attempted to kidnap the Uzumaki for their sealing knowledge and genetics. None of them survived, and the Uzumaki never raised a hand against them beyond the bare minimum it took to safely retrieve their clansmen, which was unnerving, considering their tempers when someone insulted or cheated them. The daimyo may not be superstitious, but he wouldn't dare take an Uzumaki hostage, not after both Suna and Kumo have been devastated, with the common denominator being your sister. If anything, the young Namikaze is in the most danger of being kidnapped, but he and your sister are practically married already, so it's probably too close for comfort. Comforting. Is there anything else? Not that I'm aware of. Then I'll go bring the old guys the academy student files and hope they agree. They'll do anything to get a toe back into the shinobi world. They were just testing you to see if you were worth casting their lot with. Brilliant. I marched back the way I had come. The ANBU's presence vanished as I opened the door and hurried to the Academy Records room, retrieved 2 boxes worth of files, and carried them back to the auditorium. To my surprise, I didn't interrupt a conversation like I expected, but a rock-paper-scissors contest. I yelped as they descended on the files like flies to carrion. The old guy was the fastest, even though I was certain he was missing his entire leg and part of his hand, ripped off the top of the box and picked 3 seemingly random files before hopping back. Suckers! He cackled at the others. Wait a minute, I started to say, but all the files had already been taken and the victors had already fled the auditorium. I was left knocked on my ass, facing over half the group with empty boxes at my feet. You were going to make 2 trips, right? One asked hopefully, extending a hand to help me up. I took it. No, that was all of the active academy students. I promised there was enough for at least 1 each. It's impossible to train just 1 or 2 kids without taking missions. 3 or 4 is ideal. Well, come find me in a day or 2 and I might be able to find you a student, or at least something to do. Disappointed, they left and I realized I had no excuse to do anything except meet with the angry parents waiting for me. I crept into the room without them noticing, and attached myself to the ceiling, hidden by a genjutsu. Their conversation about me was less than flattering and was along the lines of me tricking my way into power. Before they could stir up my anger, I released the Jinjutsu and stood upside down on the ceiling, waiting for them to notice me. It took nearly a minute. When they all fell silent, I flipped down and landed on the teacher's desk. Sorry about the wait. I was told you wished to speak with me on matters concerning the students enrolled in this academy. And who are you? Class president? A rather large, middle-aged civilian demanded, puffing out his chest. The effect was a bit marred by the beginnings of a beer belly. Chunin, actually, Uzumaki Kichiro, I responded coolly, biting back an insult. I am currently the commander of the shinobi stationed here, which, by default, makes me the head of this academy. What idiot put a child in charge? A woman scoffed. The Hokage assigned me to this position, and it would be greatly appreciated if this meeting would remain a civil discussion of complaints, not a bloodbath of insults and anger. That's rich coming from you, murderer. Another, familiar, woman snarled and the others shouted their agreement. With all due respect, 2 months ago, I healed your burned hand and arm to the point where it didn't even scar. She reddened, but didn't back down. If I had known who you were, I would never have allowed you near me. Emboldened by the mob mentality, she continued. Your hands are bathed in the blood of innocence. Your actions have caused many more to die. A year ago, I might have believed her, but I'd been out on the front lines. The shinobi there were barely able to defend themselves and often couldn't even stand their ground. Yes, I had killed several others, but I never touched a civilian or anyone younger than 15, and I knew most of the shinobi out there had never killed a civilian and only killed other shinobi. I struggled to remain calm. I could not afford to be the one to throw the first punch. They sneered at me and I carefully ignored the expressions. Even so, the open derision was disturbing and I gained a new respect for policemen and politicians. The closest I'd ever been to a mob was protesters at military funerals and videos on the TV screen. Now, I was facing one down, and unlike the police, I didn't have orders and a shield to hide behind. I couldn't defend myself to them, they wouldn't listen, but I had to try and calm them down, or at least contain them. It would be greatly appreciated if this meeting would remain a civil discussion of complaints, not a bloodbath of insults and anger. I repeated myself. The shouting eventually died down. Thank you. Now, I believe there were specific complaints to be addressed. Could you please state them in a polite manner? I will not have my daughter learning from murderers and brainwashed into becoming one herself. The man from before growled. My temper bubbled far too close to the surface. Is everyone here aware of the fact that Konoha is at war with both Kiri and IWA? Heads nodded. Slightly inside the borders of the Land of Fire, thousands of shinobi and kunoichi are fighting, struggling to keep the two countries at bay. Their children are being orphaned to protect yours. Your children joined this academy to protect you. Your children joined this academy to learn to protect those orphans you whip when they are forced to beg for their food because this village has nothing to give them but their life. Your children have stood up and said that the sacrifice of their parents won't be in vain. Most of them had already taken a step back. Yes, the ninja of this village are soldiers. Yes, the ninja of this village have killed. Yes, the skin of every ninja is dyed with blood, but as long as you live inside this village, as long as you live within the borders of this country, as long as you live underneath the protection of those soldiers, you have absolutely no right to spit on them, slander them, and reject them. They flinched backwards, ashamed. But, just like idiots from my world, a few of them cared more about the ideals than facts. The woman I healed stepped forward. I'd rather be dead than live under disgusting creatures like you. My head tipped to the side. Without warning, I leapt off the desk and landed on her, my feet digging into her stomach and knocking her flat on her back. I crouched on top of her, staring down curiously and letting the tiniest bit of killing intent leak out of me, just enough to keep everyone else at bay. I reached into my weapon's pouch and slowly drew my only kunai and held it against the side of her throat. You'd rather be dead, right? She stared up at me, terrified. You know what enemy shinobi do to captured Konoha ninja? They're beaten, of course. But, the hands have the more sensory receptors than any other part of the body, except, perhaps, the face. They break their fingers, shatter them, one by one. They rape the women, repeatedly. They seem to think it's funny to burn them in a pile of dead leaves. The leaves burn away and the fire goes out before the captured ninja dies, but it's still one of the most painful, horrifying experiences one can have. The whole time, the enemy shinobi don't stop mocking them, insulting them, demanding information, making promises only to break them. Sometimes, if the ninja gives up the information they want, they're returned to us to live ashamed of themselves. So go ahead, call me a murderer, call my little sister one, call your children killers, but you're the real evil. When we signed up for this job, we knew we might be subjected to that torture, but when you rage at us for corrupting your children, you're raging at your children as well. I had spread my weight evenly over the woman, but she was starting to ease anyways, so I stepped off her and pulled away. You think I'm heavy? I scoffed. There's this one IWA jutsu that crushes people under rocks bigger than your houses. The only thing that's left of them is a smear. We have to identify them by the remnants of weapons, clothes, or personal possessions. If it doesn't crush their head, then they could stay alive for hours, choking on dust. They don't die from blood loss, the blood can't escape from their body. They die because chemicals in their body become more concentrated than they can handle and their kidneys die. It's worse than poison. No one can rescue them, because they can't breathe enough to call for help, nor would they dare, in case IWA heard them instead. That's the kind of thing the people you accuse of murder fight in order to keep you safe. Stop, please stop, she begged, scrambling back. Sure, I'm just a kid, but I've been there, and don't you dare insult the people who are still there. You will respect the choices of your children, and this disrespect will end. Before the woman could make any move to stand up, I stormed out of the room. Chapter 25. I was about to enter headquarters when 3 connected blurs heading straight for me caught my eye. I automatically reached for my sticks when I recognized the 2 Hyugas and the Uchiha. I couldn't tell who was carrying whom, but at least one of them was injured. I threw open the door and they hurried inside, following me closely as I led them into the room with the table. Thankfully, I had cleared all the files off the table before I left earlier that morning. Without prompting, they laid the injured Hyuga on the table. Even before the boy was fully on the table, I had my hand on his head running diagnostics. Someone had nearly clawed out both of his eyes after slicing his Achilles tendons. Eyes were extremely delicate and there was a ridiculous number of nerves to reconnect, and something had managed to shred the retina of his left eye and the right eye was nearly gouged out. I cursed. The entire process was made even more complicated by the fact that I never healed a damaged eye before, only memorized the textbook, and the Byakugan operated differently than a normal eye. The more I tried to fix, the more the eyes seemed to fall apart. Hyuga, come here, I ordered the other Hyuga. To his credit, he didn't jerk away when I placed my hand over both his eyes. Someone had nearly managed to take one of his eyes as well, but only his eyelid sustained any damage. Using the healthy eyes as a guideline, I tried to reconstruct the eyes as best I could, but within a minute, I knew it wasn't going to work, even though I continued to try. The Uchiha made himself useful by stemming the bleeding of his own wounds and that of the 2 Hyuga. By the time he finished, I was exhausted and struggling to remain standing, finally giving up on the attempt. Shit, this isn't going to work. I've never treated damaged eyes before and I've never even studied the Byakugan. Cosmetically, I can fix it, but your vision is going to forever suck, if you can even see, and I doubt you'll be able to use the Byakugan again, unless you can find someone better than me to fix it. The last medic with knowledge of the Byakugan died 3 days ago, the now blind Hyuga said, trying to sit up. I reflexively grabbed his arm and helped. When I tried to pull my hand away, he caught my wrist with disturbing accuracy. You're shaking. I scowled and jerked my arm away. I'm assuming those bandits weren't just bandits. I redirected their attention. They were at least Jonin level, the Hyuga with his vision intact murmured, jumping up on the table to put his arm around his brother. Did you get a description? Kiri, one of the Hyuga guessed. It was one of the Yuki clan as well as one of the 7 swordsmen, both from Kirigakure, the Uchiha clarified. Brilliant. Someone knocked at the door. Come in. I called. The door opened and a fidgety Chinin Kunoichi opened the door. Her hair was extremely long and a washed-out blonde color. The entire mess was tied up in several frizzy buns and decorated with what appeared to be a handmade version of barbed wire made with tacks and ninja wire. Her Chinin vest had glass baubles sewn onto it, and instead of the standard long-sleeved uniform shirt and shinobi pants, her arms were bare and she wore a plaited, knee-length, navy skirt that reminded me of the skirts Catholic schoolgirls had to wear in my old world. She was barefoot, which was strange, but I didn't comment on any of it. What had me slightly worried was the glazed look on her face. I quickly checked for a genjutsu, but she was clean. She made me think of a lethal version of Luna Lovegood. I'm Yamanaka Mayu, she introduced herself quietly, holding out a folder to me. There's several communications for you, Uzumaki-sama. Thank you, Yamanaka-san. I took the folder from her. Mayu. Just Mayu, she insisted, but I barely heard her. I had already opened the file and was reading the coded messages. It was written in Jonin code, which should have been above Mayu's ability to decipher. She seemed professional, so even if she was capable, I doubted she read it. I wasn't supposed to be able to decode it either, but I was beginning to think I wasn't supposed to know half the things Sakumo taught me. H118, Sarutobi H.007309, incoming potential threat. Infiltration. Origin, Iwagakure. Recommended action, activate security seal 28576. H119, Sarutobi H.007309, incoming active threat. Mutiny. Origin, Konohagakure. Recommended action, 24-hour civilian lockdown. C-274, Shimura D.007309, incoming active threat. Mutiny. Origin, Konohagakure. Recommended action, 24-hour civilian lockdown, identify and publicly execute ringleaders. H120, Sarutobi H.007309, incoming active threat. Abduction. Target, Uzumaki Nagato. Goal, Rinnegan, manipulation of governing body. Origin, Amigakure. Recommended action, target lockdown, utilize seal perimeter 887 around habitation. C-275, Shimura D.007309, incoming active threat. Abduction. Target, Uchiha Hiroto. Goal, Sharingan. Origin, Kirigakure. Recommended action, target lockdown, utilize seal perimeter 887 around habitation. C-276, Shimura D.007309, incoming active threat. Abduction. Target, Hyuga Hayashi. Goal, Byakugan. Origin, Kirigakure. Recommended action, target lockdown, utilize seal perimeter 887 around habitation, apply Hyugakure seal. C-277, Shimura D.007309, incoming active threat. Abduction. Target, Hyuga Hizashi. Goal, Byakugan. Origin, Kirigakure. Recommended action, target lockdown, utilize seal perimeter 887 around habitation. H121, Sarutobi H.007309, incoming potential threat. Assassination. Target, Uzumaki Kichiro. Goal, unknown. Origin, unknown. Recommended action, draw out threat. H122, Sarutobi H.007309, incoming potential threat. Assassination. Target, Daimyo. Goal, unknown. Origin, unknown. Recommended action, target lockdown, utilize seal perimeter 887 around habitation. C278, Shimura D.007309, message, don't screw up, boy. J736, Hatake Est, 007309, message, I'm proud of you, Kichiro, and you are fully capable of succeeding in your position. Remember, always land on your feet, defy expectations and fulfill them, and fight back. Mayu-san, when were these messages received? 5 minutes ago via runner, Uzumaki-sama. The runner is awaiting your response. I pointed at the Hyuga twins. Which one of you is which? I demanded. I'm Hayashi, the one who had been blinded replied. The other didn't even bother turning his head in my direction. Inside the file was paper to reply on as well as a fountain pen. I scribbled down my coded response. C000007309, Sarutobi H, response, H118. Resources unavailable. C001007309, Sarutobi H, response, H119. Alternate measures taken. Thread addressed. C100, 007309, Shimura D, response, C274. Alternate measures taken. Thread addressed. C002, 007309, Sarutobi H, response, H120. Resources unavailable. C101, 007309, Shimura D, response, C275. Resources unavailable. C102, 007309, Shimura D, response, C276. Resources unavailable. Message, Byakugan destroyed. C103, 007309, Shimura D, response, C277. Resources unavailable. C003, 007309, Sarutobi H, response, H121. Threat level, 0. C004, 007309, Sarutobi H, response, H122. Message, if that bastard doesn't shut up and sit down soon I'll kill him myself and save everyone the effort, no one here will mourn his passing. C104, 007309, Shimura D, response, C278. Message received. Reply, it would have been more helpful if you trussed up the 7 swordsmen before you hurried them along, don't screw up again, councilman, your messes are bigger than your arrogance and I'm not sure I can clean this one up. C200, 007309, Hatake S, response, J736. Message received. C005, 007309, Sarutobi H, message, the 7 swordsmen are surrounding the village, where's the button to make them go away? I handed her the page with the coded responses. She turned to leave. A moment, Mayu-san, I said quietly. I'd rather earn your respect than to be given only through the chain of command. Her face fell. You don't remember me, do you? No? Kumo front, 6 months ago? That was 6 months ago, I deadpanned. You saved my life. I did? I honestly had no idea what she was talking about. I'd probably saved hundreds of lives on that mission and twice as many careers. She looked like she was about to cry, and as cold as it sounded, I didn't care, I'd fix the mess later. For now, I had 3 people with an active threat to their person in the room with me, as well as several unfriendly jonin camping outside the village. Minato and Kushina burst into the room at that moment, the 2 other genin who were supposed to be helping them, stumbling along behind, winded. Minato looked a little pale, but otherwise, he seemed fine. You look sick, Nisan, Kushina announced, plopping down beside me. One thing annoyed me about this world. No one got colds, except for me. No one got the flu, except me. No one got sick, except me. Every few months, I was out for the count for at least a day, more often, 2 or 3. Apparently, Kichiro had always been a bit of a sickly kid, but in my old world I could count on one hand the number of times I'd been sick or too injured to function in school or at work. 3 migraines, a broken ankle, and a nasty case of the flu. In a single year, I got sick more times than I had in 27 years of living in my old world. Injuries, though, were 10 times as common. "I'm not sick," I murmured back, rubbing my face in agitation. My hands shook. I knew I had far more strenuous training sessions that lasted twice as long as the time I had spent on this job, but the sheer magnitude of every action I made weighed on me twice as much as any training session ever could, no matter how intellectually, physically, and emotionally strenuous Sakumo made it. I needed rest. I probably could use a good meal as well, but most of all, I needed to lie down somewhere dark and safe and just sleep, preferably alone. There wasn't much rest to be found while beneath 2 pre-adolescent mini heaters and a dozen blankets, especially when I preferred to sleep with the AC on max. Not that there was any AC. "You're shaking," Hayashi pointed out. "I am certain everyone here has a job to do that does not include neglecting it to ride my ass about my health. In case you've forgotten, I am the medic here, not you." They all flinched. Mayu's fist closed around the coded message I gave her, but she didn't leave. "Report." The Uchiha began. Once we determined a chain of command, we set out to scout the south-southeast region where 2 potential hostiles had been noted, dojutsus active. The moment we were within range of the camp, both Hyugas froze and I recognized one of the 7 swordsmen. Hayashi continued. The moment the hostiles entered our range of vision, it was obvious they were Jonin level. We stopped to run back, but they somehow saw us and one of them attacked, aiming for our faces with claws of ice. I jumped in front of Hizashi to attempt the Hakushokaden, but failed when the assailant's partner slashed my ankles. That was probably the only effective way to stop that particular move. The Uchiha picked up the thread. I melted the Yuki's attack against me, grabbed both of them, and shunshined back into the village. "Do you know anything about the status of their health?" "No." "What do you think the chances are that the other 6 individuals are just Jonin from other villages like the fiasco with the rakeage?" I asked hopefully. "Negligible," Mayu said. "In this war, the 7 swordsmen haven't separated unless it's while fighting and they always end up back together." "Shit. You say that a lot," Kushina commented. "What does it mean?" "Right, I tried to curse in English whenever kids were around." "Where are those barrier seals I asked for?" I ignored Kushina's question. Minato held out a tube of paper. I took it and wrapped one of the seals around one of my sticks, tossing the others towards the most likely ANBU hiding place. To my relief, it disappeared before it landed. I quickly distracted everyone from the phenomenon. How many genin working together will it take for a single one of the swordsmen to be taken down? Theoretically, a single genin can take down a Kage, Mayu shrugged. I don't want theories, I want the numbers realistically. At least a dozen experienced genin who are accustomed to working together and they will suffer heavy casualties. We don't have a group that fits those criteria, shit. I paced, struggling to bring up what I knew about the 7 swordsmen. I remembered someone had managed to stand up to them in the manga, but I couldn't remember who. We don't have anyone here with more than a basic understanding of Kenjutsu. Hatake-sen taught you how to use his saber. Minato insisted. Yes, but that saber is currently being used elsewhere and it's not my primary weapon and too damn exhausted to be any better than a genin. Then get some rest and then go out there and kick their asses. Minato exclaimed as if it was simple. You're overestimating my abilities. With the QB helping, I'm low Jonin level at best. I doubt I could beat one of them, much less a pair and then 3 other pairs. I'll need another few years of experience and heavy training to get anywhere near that level. Everyone looked at me with a mixture of awe and envy, completely forgetting the fact that we were about to get our asses handed to us by a force a tenth of our size. The front door of the house slammed. Everyone jumped. I pushed past Minato and the two other genin to see. The Uchiha tried to stop me, but I was faster and slid out of the room. It was a pair of genin, their faces white, trying to calm 5 crying academy students and 2 other civilian children. Outside, there were raised voices. Kushina, put up silencing seals around that room. The lot of you, head in there, okay? The academy students nearly ran over me in their haste. One of the genin hit her face as she passed by me. It took a lot to upset a genin. They were shinobi after all and conditioned to be able to put away their emotions in all but the most extreme situations. As soon as the door closed behind them, I opened the front door with a bang, leaving it to swing loosely. 2 retired shinobi were trying to placate the mob, but it wasn't helping, and the fact that both had severely disfiguring injuries probably made everything worse. What is going on? I shouted above the crowd clamoring on the street. You bastard! Give me back my child! A man bellowed. He's not even enrolled in the damned academy. What is going on? I repeated myself, firmer. My second mob of the day was twice as large. In a classroom, I could make my voice resound a little bit, but in the street, my voice was thin and carried no authority whatsoever. Down the street, a group of people had gathered to watch. Among them, I recognized the daimyo. They ignored me and kept shouting indistinguishable demands. It was a few minutes to noon, and I hoped the genin I sent out to infiltrate the civilians had the sense to stay out of the way. I could see them crouched on the rooftops, hidden as well as genin could hide, barely enough to fool a civilian, much less me. I learned to spot Jonin-level opponents very quickly when Sakumo decided to start training my reflexes to react to surprise attacks. I was probably going to pay for just standing there and watching the civilians raging, but unwilling to pass some line between us. But it seemed like there was 100 major problems to deal with at once, and they were all so far above my ability to fix that I could only stop and stare at them, strategizing, as if I was in some kind of trance. In my inaction, the strength of the mob drew more civilians in, no matter how hard I tried to resolve things peacefully. The thing about mob mentality is that it makes people extremely stupid. It was a very bad idea for a civilian to threaten a shinobi, no matter what rank. Even a genin could kill a civilian faster than they knew what hit them. Sure, there's strength in numbers, but it takes a lot of people with plastic knives to take down a single person with a machine gun. When the mob reached a point where I would have had a hard time defending myself without killing anyone should they attack, most of the academy students had been covertly hurried into the building and safely locked away, along with the youngest and least experienced of the genin not guarding the gate. It only took a few minutes for the mob filled the street and go so far as to overflow into the neighboring streets. By this point, the civilians were beginning to advance menacingly on me, the line between us dissolving. Konoha was one of the hidden villages that pushed teamwork the most. Because of that, Konoha shinobi had a fairly strong moral compass for ninja, which wasn't saying much, but the point stood. Genin and academy students end up stuck at a point that leaves them with a foot in both worlds. They're treated as ninja, and, for the most part, expected to act like one, but the true impacts of being a ninja hadn't quite sunk in yet, nor had they fully abandoned the morals they grew up with. To see me, a kid just like themselves, being verbally abused by a bunch of adults yanked at their sense of justice. To hear those adults chanting down with the ninja was a personal offense. The genin started to mass behind me, shouting right back at the civilians. Most of the younger chunin would have done the same, so I didn't blame them, but they still defied orders. I waited until everything was about to erupt in violence before I acted. The way I did so would probably leave me eternally grounded for ninjutsu if Sakumo caught wind of it. With what I was intending to do, that pun was unnecessary and inappropriate. Normally ninjutsu was channeled through the hands, because it was the easiest to control that way. However, theoretically, jutsu could be performed through any tenketsu in the body, though it wasn't recommended. In fact, Ninjutsu practitioners were often specifically warned against it. Screw convention. I pulled on the Kyuubi's chakra to fuel a massive downward gust of air through my feet that quickly covered the whole block as soon as I was high enough in the air. It was strong enough that it forced everyone to a knee, and I could keep my arms crossed dramatically to make up for the absolute lack of presence my 9-year-old, 3'10", 60-pound soaking wet body had. I was extremely careful that it was only the Kyuubi's chakra that everyone below me felt, untainted by killing intent from either me or Kurama, even though we both wanted to just knock them all catatonic, or dead as Kurama wanted, until they regained their good sense and perspective. That would be quite counterproductive. Enough! I roared, the Kyuubi's chakra deepening my voice and projecting it so everyone could hear clearly. You are disgraceful to yourselves, your parents, and your children, all of you. We are at war. We are losing this war, and all you can do is shout and scream at each other? It's shameful that citizens of what used to be the most powerful of the hidden villages, the original hidden village, the hidden village built on ideals of peace and unity, would turn against itself so easily. Civilians, you claim this is about the academy children, but let me put something into perspective for you. There are 14 academy students who are not a part of a shinobi clan. Of those 14, 9 are orphans who speak for themselves. 5 come from civilian families. It is the responsibility of everyone in this village to step up and protect it and the children of it. It is absolutely repulsive that you are protesting the decision of 5 children who chose to step up and learn to protect themselves because you don't have the guts to do it instead. Under normal circumstances, the penalty for such blatant disobedience of the established rules of this village is death. These protests end now. If you don't like the way this village is protected or led, then leave. You have 1 hour to gather your things and march out of this village to fend for yourselves. If you stay and attempt to disobey the laws of this village again, you will be killed. Genin, you had explicit orders to stand down from this conflict, yet 31 of you directly disobeyed that order. You know the penalty for insubordination to this degree. Report to interrogation in 1 hour. Dismissed. I shunshined away, aiming for the most secluded part of the village I knew of, the small forest beside the memorial stone. I landed the shunshin 10 yards from where I intended it, on my hands and knees. Before I even established if I was alone or not, the little bit of food left in my stomach clawed and burned its way up my esophagus. It was mostly bile, and it was barely enough to spit out into the mat of leaves beside me. I bent over until my forehead nearly touched the ground, my eyes burning and my hands pulling at my hair. Someone took a knee beside me and laid a heavy hand on my back. The remnants of the Kyuubi's chakra automatically identified them as rat. Without a word, he smothered the Kyuubi's chakra with his own until it dissipated. As it left, my exhaustion, stress, and frustration just seemed to grow heavier. Kichiro-kun, Bird is impersonating you in order to take care of those still in headquarters. He reported softly. Unless it's urgent, you can deal with the rest of the problems once you've gotten some rest. You should have been pulled out hours ago. He picked me up like a child and started to weave a powerful jinjutsu to hide us before sunshining to the Uzumaki house. ISE wearily opened the door a few seconds later, and the ANBU settled me gently in his arms before taking off, never seen, and ISE hurried inside without question. I could hear the sound of children eating and chatting in the dining room as ISE set me on my feet. "You're in a bad state, kiddo," he murmured, helping me slide the vest and haori off my shoulders and hanging them up on hooks that had probably been installed sometime that day. I took off my shoes, and as soon as I was done, he picked me up and carried me into the living room, closing the door behind us, and sitting down on one of the chairs, rocking slightly. My parents and grandparents in my former life weren't very good parents. My immediate needs may have been met and they kept me on the straight and narrow, but I always knew I was missing something, and I didn't care until now. Unlike them, ISE cared about me as a person, not as a legacy or responsibility. I curled against him and was asleep before I could think any further. Chapter 26. I woke up to the rumble of ISE's chest beneath my ear. Unconsciously, I clutched at his shirt even as he rubbed my shoulder reassuringly. Someone had removed the remainder of my gear as I slept, then tucked a warm blanket under my chin. I blinked open my eyes. My grip on his shirt had pulled his collar down just enough to reveal a thick, old scar just beneath his collarbone. Just past him, all my gear was neatly piled onto a small end table. On the corner of the table was a sweating glass of water and one of my textbooks on human anatomy balanced atop it. ISE replied to someone and the room fell silent once again. He wrapped the arm he had been gesturing with around me. "Feeling better?" he asked softly. I nodded, tightening my grip on him. I could sure as hell act like a child if I wanted to. By my calculations, I had about a decade of child time stored up from my previous life and I wanted to use it. "I'm not going to kick you off, kiddo," he assured me, his grip tightening the slightest. "I'll be here as long as you need me, and I'll be here even when you don't." "That's a promise." "Promise, promise?" I asked in a small voice. I deserve to be a child. "Promise, promise." "No matter what?" "It doesn't matter what you say, do, or even think, Kichiro. I'll be here for you no matter what. I'll love you and I'll take care of you. A promise is a promise." There was a long silence as I buried my face in ISE's shoulder, forcibly silencing any thoughts that did not pertain to my immediate vicinity and listening to ISE's steady heartbeat underneath my ear. "Ryunosuke, your father, was a shinobi, you know that?" "Yeah, he died just after Kushina was born. He was one of my friends, just like Midori was one of Fuso's." I stayed silent, gripping his shirt tightly. The Uzumaki may be a mostly civilian clan, but unlike the clans here, the civilians take care of the shinobi just as much as the shinobi protect the civilians. You work in a world without morals and I know you don't like it, I know you fought against it. He put his hand on the side of my head and rubbed his thumb over the seal on my forehead. I squeezed my eyes closed. "While you were on the mission to seal the Hachibi, yes I know about it, even though the general public doesn't, I met with the Sandame. He told me a lot about you, about the sealing, about your personality, about your sister. He was trying to make sure I knew exactly what I was getting myself into when Fuso and I promised to take care of you. Remember what I said about the civilians taking care of shinobi? Well, you can talk to me about anything, you know that? I've heard it all, kiddo. You're not going to surprise or scare me with anything you've come up against, okay?" His arms tightened and he laid his head on mine. "You can tell me anything, anytime. I won't breathe a word to anyone, I promise." I didn't move or react for a long time, but eventually, I couldn't help it. I threatened to slaughter a bunch of civilians earlier and they were entitled to their concerns, they were right to say something was wrong. ISE's arms tightened and he carted his fingers through my hair. He took a breath to say something but I ignored it. The genin got involved and I ordered them to turn themselves over. They disobeyed a direct order and they were right to, but I told a bunch of kids to turn themselves over to be killed. My throat closed. ISE shifted so he could look at me. "Let me ask you this, were you wrong according to the law?" "They were right." "That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you, according to the laws you are charged to carry out and constrained by, were wrong." "Sometimes the law." "That's not what I'm asking. Did you break the law?" "No, but..." "Did they?" "Yes, but..." "If you hadn't done anything, what would have happened?" "Anything could have happened." "What was the most likely course of events?" he asked patiently. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could answer, I realized the conclusion he was leading me towards. "Please, just stop," I begged. "Hatake-san never taught you to distinguish between a lawful, necessary evil and a true evil, did he? Institutionalized evil is still evil, isn't it? Or he tried to teach you and you refused to listen. We're not talking about institutionalized evil, kiddo." "Then what? If, say, the Kazekage attempted to kidnap Minato and Kushina in front of you, how would you respond?" I would do my utmost to make sure he didn't succeed. QB or not, no matter how much the Hokage thinks you're capable of, you are most certainly not Kage level. I didn't have a response to that. He was absolutely right. If the Kazekage were to attack them, you would have to use every ability you have to try and counter him, correct? Yes. You would use lethal force, correct? Yes. But remember, the Kazekage would only be attacking them in order to protect his own people. By threatening them in a way that cannot be ignored, he would be able to manipulate you, Jiraiya-sama, and by extension, Hokage-sama as well, all to prevent his people from being harmed by Konoha. Would you still use lethal force? He started this war. It doesn't matter who started it, this world was on a slippery slope towards war on the part of every single entity involved. Would you care what his motives are when there is an immediate threat to the people you love? Not really, I answered honestly. I like to think of myself as a good person, but I was just as bad as everyone else. It was a humiliating thought. And if the person initiating the threat was stronger than you would use lethal force to stop them, correct? I wouldn't have a choice. What if, say, Minato and Kushina were fighting with each other and refused to be protected? They would never. And if you had to address their fight first, would you threaten them with the potential consequences of their utter lack of cooperation, no matter how severe they may be? If that's what it took, I would have to, I acknowledged. Do you see the analogy? Oh. You aren't omnipotent, kiddo. You're strong, yes, but not strong enough to prevent problems before they happen or powerful enough to stop them from escalating. It doesn't matter how weak the civilians are separately, together, after rallying the genin against them and nearly initiating a fight, they are more powerful than even a Kage. You didn't mindlessly threaten a bunch of genin and civilians, you threatened a mob that could have torn this village apart more thoroughly than any enemy ninja could hope to accomplish. No, what you did may not have been right, but it was your only choice unless you wanted to see this village and the people in it razed to dust. What about those genin who are probably already dead? Only the ultimate authority in this village can kill a loyal shinobi. You don't have to kill them, no matter what procedure says, just make sure they've learned their lesson. They've likely only been detained. What time is it? Just before 1700. That means I have to go soon for the genin meeting. I made no motion to move from ISE's lap. I like being cared for far too much to voluntarily leave. You're staying and eating a full meal before you go anywhere. I may not be a shinobi, but I'm a fully trained Uzumaki and no one enters or leaves this house without my consent. So no leaving without permission. I eyed the walls ominously at that statement. He didn't mean it to be malicious, but any other ninja probably would have balked at the implication they were trapped. You know, it's technically against the law for you to detain a shinobi. ISE rolled his eyes and set me on my feet, the blanket still wrapped snugly around my shoulders. Yes, but just because you're technically clan head doesn't mean you don't have to defer to your elders. He stood up and shook out his legs before picking me up and setting me on his shoulders. Sure, I could race across rooftops and perform gymnastics, acrobatics, and contortionist moves people from my old world could only dream of, but there was something about being carried by someone for no reason whatsoever that was more thrilling than anything else, even though I had to duck to avoid hitting my head on the ceiling and had to slide down to cling to ISE's back to safely make it through the doorway, the blanket slipping off. Forgotten. Kairo and Ai-sama. To-chan! The other children exclaimed as we passed through the door and ISE closed it behind him. My gear was still within arm's reach and I was certain that wasn't a good thing for civilian kids to have access to. Ni-sama? I asked ISE softly, struggling to ignore the tickle in my throat. He chuckled. You're smart, but you got no clue how much the other kiddos of this village adore you, and a lot of it originated with this group here. He turned to address the kids crowding around his waist. I hadn't noticed before, but ISE wasn't a small man. He was easily almost 6 feet tall and was strong enough to not have a problem dragging the 7 kids hanging off him away from the door. I suppose that, being a doctor, he would probably have to drag people around more often than he would probably like. Then again, the kids were practically starving in the overwhelmed, understaffed, and poorly funded Konoha orphanage, and a few months wasn't enough to feed them up to healthy weights. Most of them had barely grown since we left Yuzu. "Why aren't all of you kiddos helping your Kachan in the kitchen?" he asked. "Kushina-chan and Minato-chan are helping." The little girl, whose arm I broke nearly 3 years ago, which I still felt a little guilty for, exclaimed from behind me, just before her arms snaked around my waist and she hung off me. I tightened my grip on Ise. "Chan?" I asked, slightly incredulous. I tried calling Minato that once and he nearly managed to kick me between the legs in retaliation. Kushina didn't mind, but that was probably because she was a girl. "They're both wusses," the girl informed me sagely. I snorted. Psychological trauma aside, they were both crazy strong. The only reason I beat Minato in spars was because I was much more creative and able to track Jonin-level opponents. If he kept control of his temper and stopped trying to go toe-to-toe with ninjutsu he didn't have, he probably could beat me with a handful of luck on his side. I'd never seen them spar, but Kushina was on his level, with the iron sharpens iron deal they had going. I knew better than to try and face the two of them at once. I suspected they were better than I thought if the story I heard on the border about how they gave Jiraiya a run for his money for a bet was accurate. "I don't think they appreciate the name-calling," I informed her before detaching her grip from around my waist and climbing up Ise to reach the ceiling and stand there, upside down, out of reach of the grasping hands. "They hate it," the girl said, standing directly beneath me. Ise was sitting on the floor talking to the other children, abandoning me to her and Nagato. "Then why do you call them that?" "Because it's true." I was about to respond when Fuso shrieked in surprise. At the scream, I reflexively bent my knees and stepped into an upside-down taijutsu stance, grabbing at my absent sticks. "You are going to give me a heart attack one day, young man." She scolded me half-heartedly. "It's time for dinner, everyone," she continued. Everyone dashed into the dining room except the little girl beneath me. I frowned and took a step towards the dining room. She stayed underneath me. I took 2 quick steps before scampering into the dining room, and the girl stayed under me the entire time until Fuso snatched her up and placed her on a bright pink flower-patterned cushion around the low table. "Stop teasing your brothers, Misaki," she scolded lightly as I dropped to the ground. Fuso pulled a bright green cushion down from a shelf in the corner of the room where the other children were taking their cushions and sitting around the table. "I want Kairo-kun to sit next to me," Misaki said enthusiastically. Fuso obliged and set what I assumed to be my cushion down beside her in the middle of the table, patting it reassuringly. It was the same bright green as my Haori, the same bright green as medical ninjutsu, and was patterned with what appeared to be silver senbon. Fuso and Ise sat together, opposite of me, while Minato sat on my other side, Kushina beside him. The food was spread out on the table, and after a clipped itadakimasu everyone began to eat. It wasn't until a few bites in that I realized I honestly couldn't remember the last time I ate. There seemed to be plenty to go around. I politely listened as Misaki managed to eat anything placed in front of her while speaking, but never speaking with her mouth full. I didn't quite figure out how she did it. I was too occupied with my own food, but towards the end of my meal I found myself insanely curious. I used shinobi skills that not even Minato, who was right next to me, would notice as I continued to slip food onto the girl's plate, and it continued to vanish into her mouth even though she never stopped talking. While Fuso divvied up the last scraps of food to the very full children, Misaki decided she wasn't content just babbling at me. She linked her arm in mine and nearly sat in my lap as she leaned into me. She was a cute child, I would give her that. Fuso had tied her hair out of her face for the meal, but it was nearly as long as Kushina's, who refused, for some reason, to cut her hair, even though it was a liability in the field. The girl wore an obviously new, simple kimono made of rough, homespun fabric. Nice clothes were non-existent considering the lack of trade during wartime. All the children were dressed similarly, and the Uzumaki crest was very clear on their backs, larger than the crest on the Konoha shinobi flak jackets. It made a point that the Uzumaki still survived. In my opinion, it was a little dangerous for them to make themselves targets so willingly, but they were civilians in Kushina, and I took all the heat for our names simply because we were ninja and visible to people outside the village. Nagato was the one truly in danger because he had the potential to be a shinobi but had yet to be trained to defend himself. Belatedly, I realized that I had been staring at the wall in front of me, lost in thought while being asked a question. Minato elbowed me sharply and pointed at Misaki. "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying very much attention. What was it again?" I asked her as kindly as I could. "Will you do my hair, Kairo-kun? Kushina-chan is mean and Minato-chan sucks." Minato choked as he took a sip of water and glared at the girl. Unfortunately, his and Kushina's combined killing intent was pathetic and probably wouldn't even upset an infant, but they still received a warning glare from the two adults across the table. The look was also directed at Misaki for the careless insults, but she didn't seem to notice. I glanced at the time. I had a little more than 20 minutes before I had to get moving and figure out whatever the hell I missed while asleep. I looked to Fuso for rescue, but she only smiled and nodded in encouragement. Misaki took Fuso's answer as mine, grabbed my wrist, and all but dragged me out of the room, with almost immediate help from the other girl orphan from Yuzu. Kushina just smirked at my plight and waved at me sadistically. See if I would defend her from the name-calling hellion again. Minato tried to trip me, but I accidentally not really stomped on the pressure point in his ankle and fell to jab my knee into the pressure point in Kushina's thigh. They were both too proud to do anything other than wince. It was a petty victory, but they knew better than to tease me. Misaki dragged me to the small vanity mirror set up in the corner of the room as well as a collection of dolls spread out around it. I couldn't help but compare the girl to Kushina. At her age, Kushina was spending every free moment training or studying. Misaki was frighteningly normal for her age, which I assumed to be 6. The other girl shoved a comb and ribbon into my hands while Misaki sat down in front of the mirror. "I want something pretty. Something special," she demanded. Frankly, just like any normal guy, I didn't know how to do hair, so I stalled by brushing out the tangles and trying to remember what a braid looked like and figure out the mechanics of it. When I thought about it, I'd never seen a single braid in this world. After a long minute of thought, I remembered when she had tried to teach me how to French braid. Her hair had been just long enough to hold one if it started on the top of her head, and I had managed it. Misaki sat surprisingly still as I struggled to do something I only accomplished once, nearly 4 years ago. Thank heavens for the dexterity Sakumo drilled into me. It wasn't much different than twisting ninja wire to make it stronger. The hardest part was tying the thing with a ribbon instead of an elastic band before the whole thing came out. How's that?" I asked, wincing. It sort of resembled the French braid she taught me, if I squinted. Misaki reached back to feel it, her mouth hanging open. "I suppose I could try it again." The other girl cut me off with a squeal so high-pitched that I had to cover my ears. "Yuzu!" ISE scolded from the adjacent room. "No screeching. Use your words." The two girls collided with me, knocking me backwards. Across the room, Kushina was sending me a dirty look as I gaped from the lack of air and silently begged for her help. "Do mine next." Yuzu begged from my stomach. I complied, and a few minutes later, she had a matching braid and Fuso had come over to watch. "Why didn't you ever do my hair like that?" Kushina demanded. "You never asked," I answered honestly. "And I didn't think I could do it." Kushina opened her mouth to respond when a knock sounded at the door. From Minato's expression, he obviously didn't recognize the person at the door. I was there in an instant, warily opening it, my hand over the seal that would immediately secure the house with a tiny pulse of chakra. It was unneeded as I recognized the ANBU bird's chakra signature beneath a hinge of me. I quickly let him in as he dropped the hinge, closing the door behind the ANBU and ushering him into the living room before the rest of those assembled could get a good look. I scanned the seals around the door before finding the privacy one and activating it. Rat ordered me to report. I nodded once and started to pull on my abandoned gear. While impersonating you, I calmed those taking refuge in headquarters until the situation settled enough for them to be escorted out by the retired shinobi. Those with dojutsus have remained inside of headquarters to recover from the attempt to steal their eyes. The elder Hyuga is unable to walk due to injury that is threatening to become severe. He refuses to see a civilian doctor in the meantime, and his injuries were beyond my abilities to heal. All genin ordered to report to interrogation have obeyed and wait in individual holding cells. Several civilian families unaffiliated with a clan have left. 4 of the 5 academy students with living parents unaffiliated with a clan have lost their parents in this exodus. In order to reduce the strain on the orphanages, the retired shinobi are taking in academy students without parents. It is projected that those with specific attention will be up to an acceptable level to graduate to genin in under a year. No children have been taken out of the village, but several have been found abandoned inside of it, though, from their stories, it sounds like they snuck away from their parents before they left. Those with the capacity to be shinobi have been given to retirees for training. So, basically you're saying we now have a split between ages in this village as well as professions. Bird shifted uncomfortably. Your analysis is correct. Brilliant, we now have a bunch of kids creating a political faction. Bird snorted at the absurdity of the statement, but quickly regained professionalism. Orders? Meet me in interrogations after the genin meeting. Bird didn't move. Is there something else? I'm ordered to remain with you for the next 24 hours. I'm assuming Rat's shift is over then. Bird nodded and pulled back, disappearing completely as I readjusted to pouch of senbon on my thigh. I deactivated the security seal and jerked open the door to reveal Minato and Kushina huddled around it, trying to listen in. Both of you go get a report from the gates, I ordered, pushing through them and heading straight to door, don my vest and Haori. Is everything alright? Fuso asked as the genin slipped on their shoes and ran out without question. There's nothing immediately wrong, I answered. Keep Nagato here for safety's sake. There's an active abduction order from AIM on his head and no available nin to guard him. I waited just long enough to see ISE's acknowledgement before taking off towards headquarters. I nearly skewered myself on a kunai as I stepped inside the building. Without thinking, I cracked my stick across the person's wrist, forcing it to cross their body, and followed up with a stunning blow to the back of their knee, and slamming the much larger kid against the wall as I recognized the Uchiha. Instead of unpleasantly announcing your presence before I'm even inside the door, it would be better to wait behind it and identify your opponent before you attack, Uchiha-san. Any other chunin would have killed first and asked questions second. I released him and he surveyed me with his Sharingan. You're the real one. He gaped in surprise. Someone's been impersonating you and... I know, it was an ANBU. I needed rest, so someone took over the aftermath while I took it, good for noticing. I left him rubbing the back of his knee and shouldered open the door to where the Hyugas were discussing something. Hayashi-san, why did you refuse civilian treatment? The clan policy, Hayashi began. I don't care about your clan policy. Their treatment is just as good as an Irionin, even if it takes longer. I know you've been trained in fighting blind due to the risk that your exact situation may occur, as has your twin, so your career isn't over. Denying temporary treatment only lengthens your recovery time after you receive treatment. At the very least, the civilian doctors could have reconstructed your tendons in the time I was unavailable, which would have made my job much easier and much less time-consuming. I crouched down and started to unwrap the soiled bandages, my hand already glowing with chakra. In less than 10 minutes, I had fully healed all but the superficial damage to the Hyuga's ankles and wrapped that with clean bandages. Walk around and jump a few times, I ordered, backing up. Hayashi stood and took a few shaky steps, but the healing was successful. He successfully ran through a short kata. Great! Obviously, all 3 of you are off the patrols around the village, but I'll find other things for you to do. For now, follow me. Without looking to see if they were following or not, I left headquarters and headed to the academy auditorium. In the street, civilians skirted me, their heads down and faces flushed with shame. I didn't care about them as long as the problem was over. The front of the academy had been vandalized. I ignored it. It was one of the lowest priorities. Minato and Kushina landed in front of me. They said all the enemy jonin started to walk around the village at exactly noon and have made 3 circuits already. Otherwise, no change. I nodded to him and marched inside the auditorium where the genin were already gathered. Chapter 27. I stood in front of the assembly. A quick head count revealed there was only 25 genin present. That would barely be enough to create the next shift. 3 of those who would be put on shift would be slightly injured. I wasn't comfortable with it, but I couldn't put Hayashi on shift, for obvious reasons, and Hizashi and the Uchiha had an active threat against them, so now that I was capable of something, they needed to stay near me. The 4 of us would probably make the strongest team the village had to offer, so moving as a unit would probably be best. Minato would have to tough out the pain running a patrol would undoubtedly cause. The other 2 should have been fine, it was only scrapes and bruises from a spar gone bad several days ago. I could heal the injuries, but it wasn't worth the energy. Congrats, you're all on shift for the night, I informed them dryly. The Kiri Jonin are attempting an intimidation tactic by walking around the village. Do not engage. If they attack, which is unlikely at this point, or reinforcements for them arrive, sound the alarm and fall back. It is vital that if the alarm sounds, you get onto or inside the walls as fast as possible. You will have 5 seconds from the time the alarm begins or you will be trapped outside. No one, and I mean no one, is to sound any alarm unless the jonin are already inside of the village or one of you is dead. Do I make myself clear? The contingency that is in place will only work once. Once that contingency is in place, this village is as good as lost unless several Konoha teams return and are able to fight them off, even though there will be absolutely no way to contact anyone outside the village. That was a bit of an exaggeration, but if I had to put up the seals, we would be cut off completely from the rest of the Konoha forces, basically placing ourselves under siege, which was decidedly not good. Unless Kiri actually put us under siege, then it would be even worse. If I took down the seals after putting them up the first time, Kiri would no doubt take full advantage of the opportunity and actually attack the village. Minato raised a hand. What's the contingency? It doesn't matter, so leave it be and just follow orders. Does it have to do with? Minato! I barked harshly. Loose lips sink ships. Leave it be. That was actually more accurate than I expected it to be, with the fight in water country going on and the Kiri shinobi at our gates. Everyone but Uchiha-san and the Hyuga twins are dismissed. The genin left in a hurry. Hayashi-san, I want you practicing your taijutsu with Uchiha-san. Be careful to avoid injuries. Hizashi-san, you're with me. Shouldn't I practice with? Hizashi began. No, you both use the same style and know each other too well. If Hayashi-san has to fight, it won't be against people he's familiar with. I turned on my heel and strode out of the room. I needed to get the rest of the genin back on duty as fast as possible. I leapt onto the rooftops and dashed to the interrogation department. The chunin working scowled at me, but pointed to the row of cells the genin probably were. We're not wasting any manpower on them, he informed me. I never expected you to. I made my way into the first cell and jerked it open. It wasn't even locked. The genin inside sat on a metal bed, knees pulled up to his chest. I closed the cell door behind me, leaving Hizashi standing outside. Why? I asked the genin. It wasn't right. To disobey a direct order? No, that wasn't right. They were shouting and screaming and there were too many. So, shouting and screaming back was going to solve it? No, it wouldn't. It would only make things worse. Instead of being the better person, you lowered yourself to their level. It wasn't about shinobi versus civilians out there, it was about who gave into fear and panic first. But I ordered you to stand down for a very good reason. Unless you can give me a very good reason as to why you decided to disobey a direct order, I will have you punished. He curled in on himself. I thought it was the right thing to do. So, does that make you the ultimate authority? No. I didn't think so. Do you have any better defense? He shook his head. You know the Konoha sign language, correct? He nodded. Lie down and don't move, I ordered, reaching into my supply pouch and stepping forward. He hesitated for a minute, but knew better than to disobey. With swift movements, I painted a seal on his throat and activated it. I took a step back. Communication is a privilege. The seal will prevent you from communicating with anyone, and you are not to use the sign language for anything but the communication necessary to complete your duties. I opened the door. How long? He signed to me. Faster than he could track, I grabbed his fingers and twisted them painfully before violently slamming him against the nearest wall. That's your second strike, genin. If he had been able to make a noise, he would have screaming as I painfully twisted his arms in a direction they were not supposed to go. Don't test me again. I shoved him out of the cell and he scampered off, shaken, but unharmed. I was extremely grateful that the rest of the encounters with the insubordinate genin went similarly. It was nearly 10 at night when I shoved the last genin out of their cell. You're too soft, Hisashi said as the last one disappeared. Probably, but my sensei put that same seal on me when I mouthed off to him one too many times. They're not going to forget the lesson. What lesson? The Hyuga scoffed. Disobeying orders is a very bad idea. You all but gave us permission to challenge your orders on the first day. Challenge them, yes, if you have a better idea. I never gave anyone permission to disobey or disregard them. Even I know better than that. You're too soft. You shouldn't have allowed even that. If I didn't, I'd be a giant hypocrite. You've challenged orders? I'm not proud of it, but yes. I heard you talk back to Akage too. I'd like to hear that story. Hisashi nudged as we leaned against the desk which the disgruntled shinin vacated when I started releasing the genin. Okay, which time? You've talked back to Akage more than once? I talk back to everyone I know. How are you still alive? I'm a Jinchuriki and a medic, I get a lot of leeway no one else does. I never made it out of those encounters unscathed, and you could make the argument that I might have been better off dead. Okay then, what was the first time? What happened? That time, I got the Kyuubi sealed inside of me for it and started the war with Kumo. I'm pretty sure the actual conversation is extremely classified. Then what about the second time? Pretty much every time I've challenged Akage, the conversation ends up classified. You're no fun. Good for me. I stood up and started to walk out. We plodded down the nearly empty main street of the village. We were nearly to headquarters when a flustered genin appeared, barreling towards us. They're doing something, we don't know what it is, and they said to get you, the genin panted. I immediately took off towards the wall in a shunshin. Going down a straight street was much easier than traveling across rooftops and around corners in a shunshin. I stumbled out of it, overshooting slightly and landing a few feet in front of the terrified group of genin trying to stare down the 7 swordsmen of Kiri. I tried to brush the slip-up off as intentional. Hello, I was told I was needed here. I greeted pleasantly. Your Hokage must be quite the idiot to put a child in charge. The apparent spokesman of the group took a step forward so there was only the thickness of the village walls between us. I agree, but it couldn't be helped. I shrugged as the swordsman in front of me balanced his blade, which looked like Samahata, across his shoulders like a yoke. He reminded me of an Akimichi, positively huge, with paint on his face and a girth that wouldn't fit through most doors. Are you sure you can see me from down there, little medic? Fuguki-san, is it? I asked. He sneered at me but nodded when I got the name right. With all due respect, may I ask you a question? He gestured for me to continue. I opened my mouth to ask my question. Uzumaki-sama. I heard Mayu call out. A few seconds later, she landed beside me and handed me a scroll. Thank you, I told her politely, and she quickly melted into the ranks of genin. This isn't my question, but do you mind if I read this message? Go ahead, he invited amicably. Let it not be said Kurodakure has no manners. I bowed shallowly and opened the scroll, quickly deciphering the contents. Well, this is insulting, I exclaimed with mock horror. The enemy Nin in front of me started to snicker. I'm sure your mother will reassure you later, little boy. One grumbled. Oh, it's not insulting to me, it's insulting you, Fuguki-san. The snickers immediately turned to growls. According to Shimura-san, he's the man in charge of the Konoha forces opposing Kiri, I explained. He asks me to send his regards to you for the information which led to the capture of several Kurodakure jonin. I do believe Shimura-san is calling you a traitor, but don't murder the messenger. One of the others laughed loudly and pushed his way to the front. I have to give it to you, kid, you are one clever bastard, but you can't turn our forces against each other so easily. Black hair framed his face, and if it wasn't for his disturbingly deep voice, he could have passed as a kunoichi. I'm sorry, I haven't properly memorized the Kurodakure entries in the bingo book yet, I am only a kid. Yuki Yujui, he introduced himself with a dramatic bow. Nice to meet you, I'm Uzumaki Kichiro. Ah, Konoha's spirit of the triage, the first male medic Nin. Sounds like a girly profession to go into, kid. You sound a little jealous of something a baby kunoichi can do better than you. One of the swordsmen erupted in a high-pitched laugh. The kid got you there, Yuki. How does it feel to be embarrassed by a 6-year-old? A small woman stepped forward. Her hair stuck up in a way that reminded me of the Kyuubi's ears. I bit back that comment. Announcing I was a Jinchuriki wouldn't be very smart, especially since I was nearly certain Kiri didn't know that particular detail. Kunoichi-san? I interrupted Yuki's response. What is it, clever kid? I'm 9. You're a smart ass, she deadpanned. Guilty as charged, I mimicked the Yuki's bow. His killing intent washed over me, but I'd faced the Kyuubi's ire without flinching. I could take his annoyance. So, are we done mocking each other? I think it's only polite of me to ask why you're here. I wouldn't want to come to the wrong conclusion and end up in a giant fight that could be completely avoided because I'm going to be the one cleaning up the injuries afterwards. Or we could pause this conversation. I've been told you've been walking a good portion of the day, and I know very well how tiring it can be. Being a kid and all, I get naps even though adults don't. I suppressed a wince. I might have gone a little too far on that one. He's insane, squeaked one of the genin behind me. I sent a sharp look over my shoulder at the genin who couldn't keep their mouth closed. The whole point of drawing their ire was so they wouldn't care about the others. At the second interruption, I wasn't sure that plan would work, so I changed tactics. I think you're right, little genin, the kunoichi stage whispered. Okay, I drew the attention back to myself. I'm really asking right now. Why are you here? We were hoping we could speak with your Kage. Fuguki was back in charge. He lifted Samahana off his shoulders and leveled it at me. He's honestly not here. He left a little more than a day ago. Bring me the person in charge. I am in charge. Not even the daimyo is messing with my authority anymore. Then bring me an adult. I am an adult. Clan head and everything. Can I hold your sword? Please? Can it cut through things as easily as it steals chakra? It doesn't look sharp, but I know better than to only trust my eyes. Boy. Okay, fine, I can be serious. Big grumpy Kichiro coming right up. I put my hands on my hips and puffed out my chest. Hello, Mr. Fuguki-san. What can I do for you this very late evening? The other swordsman and swordswoman suppressed snorts of laughter. I didn't expect Kiri Ninja to have a sense of humor, but whatever worked, worked. Even the genin giggled behind me, but it was immediately silenced as killing intent washed over them. I relaxed and let my tone turn serious. I really am in charge and I would really like to know what you want to avoid a fight if I can. Kirigakure wishes to end this war by taking control of Konoha and thus forcing your forces to surrender. Then go ahead and take the village. I stepped aside and gestured them in while the genin stared at me, horrified. Fearful of a trap, none of them moved and I retook my position, struggling not to cough at the tickle in my chest. Even if you take the village, it won't do you much good. You see, Konoha is practically empty right now, there's only genin. Except me, I'm a chunin, so is the girl who delivered the insulting message from Shimura-san, but really, there's no one of value here. Well, I suppose that's not entirely true, the daimyo is here, but right now, people don't really like him and if you want to kill him, I can show you where he's staying. I had a feeling my bluff was only beginning. You have a point there, kid. Fuguki said sneering. But someone's put a lot of trust in you, so I'm pretty sure you would make a good bartering piece. I'm sure Suno would pay handsomely for me considering I totally humiliated their best poison experts. IWA probably wants to get me back for supposedly raising a bunch of people from the dead, even though they just didn't do their job. As for the Hokage, I'll let you in on a little secret. He doesn't particularly like me, and I'm pretty sure Shimura-san is out to get me. Poor swordsman, he wasn't exactly sure what to do with that information, especially since they couldn't tell if I was lying or telling the truth or even if my information was accurate. Considering Kushina looked absolutely horrified as she hung back in the crowd of genin with a hinge to hide her hair color, I was doing a good job of convincing people. Between her and Minato, they knew all of my tells, and they were convinced. A bunch of strangers stood no chance. Fuguki took a step back. The Hokage left Konoha as the decoy, with just enough imbeciles to cause trouble, while he set up base elsewhere. Risky move, but smart. Well, the fact that he dumped me here with no idea what to do makes a ton more sense now. What do you know about Fuinjutsu, little Uzumaki? Kiri destroyed Uzushiogakure, so it's not like I have access to any kind of legacy. I know standard explosive tags and stuff, but my sensei didn't have time to teach me more before the war started. This place isn't worth our time, Fuguki grumbled. Hey, I find that personally insulting. We have a decent tourist and travelers resorts that would love a bit of business. The onsen here are pretty sweet if you want to try it out. They don't stand a snowball's chance in hell against us. We might as well enjoy ourselves, the Yuki said. The hell? They were actually considering stepping onto the village? I mentally ran through the seals I knew that could contain them in a single building, if I could manage it. I bounced on my toes, my hands behind my back, appearing as if I was waiting eagerly for their decision while I signed to the genin to get the hell out of Dodge. If this backfired, it wasn't going to be pretty. We deserved time at the onsen and a bed for once. I glanced behind me and saw the genin's faces switch to terror. Several fled and the rest slowly backed away as if they were facing a pack of rabid dogs. This way, I chirped, leading them to the closest hotel. When the civilian owners saw us coming, they fled, as well as the handful of patrons woken by the commotion. I bowed deeply and ushered them inside. A moment too late, they realized the trap. Uzumaki! Fuguki bellowed as I slammed a seal against the doorframe. The walls, roof, and floorboards started to glow with a quarantine seal. No one was getting out of that building. I guess quarantine isn't much different than prison. Damn, that seal took a lot of chakra. The genin and gathering audience gaped as the hotel rattled with angry Kirinin. You are going to pay dearly for this, Uzumaki. The kunoichi pushed her way forward to stand in front of me. Yes, I probably am going to pay for it. In fact, I think I'm suffering from a very serious case of chakra exhaustion. Sensei is going to beat me silly for it. As everyone started to realize exactly what happened, the cheering started. Eventually, I swear, someone is going to figure out how to not underestimate me. You're a bastard, Uzumaki. You know, I'd be more inclined to believe you if I wasn't looking at an overconfident, hedonistic group of individuals who is supposed to be one of the strongest teams in the shinobi nations. Come to think about it, you were just taken down by a 9-year-old shonin's medic technique. I don't envy trying to live that down. I think I'm going to pass out soon, someone catch me please. I staggered to the side and suddenly Kushina was there, putting my arm around her shoulders. I am feeling really, really awful. Be a dear and put up a bunch of those fancy chakra-specific seals and tie them to a bunch of people so no one can free them by themselves. Preferably use people with Kekkei Jinkai so the signature can't be copied. Kushina passed me off to someone else and got to work. After some indeterminate time, Kushina finished and someone placed my hand against the seal. That is some damn fine fuinjutsu, one of the swordsmen commented, but I didn't see which. Kushina ignored them. You're in charge, so you gotta be one of the people who has the key. I'm out, peeps, I said as I used the last of the chakra keeping me conscious to lock the seal. Straight face. Hey kiddo, we were getting worried there, you've been out for almost a week, ISE's voice cut through the haze that left me suspended in a half-asleep state. I don't feel too good, I wheezed and pushed the damp cloth off my forehead. I hated damp hair more than I hated the heat from a fever. Trying to sit up was an ordeal, especially when ISE held me down easily. You still are very sick, kiddo. You were barely breathing for several days and your fever still hasn't broken. Wait, I was out for a week? What did I miss? I pushed the frustration of only being able to say 2 or 3 words every few breaths. Well, congratulations, you've been instrumental in ending another war. The Mizukage preferred to have his swordsmen and their swords returned rather than continue the war. Kumo and Konoha are splitting the reparations won from the land of water, though not very evenly. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the grit that glued them shut. Who's in charge of the village? Shimura-sama returned 3 days after you successfully trapped the 7 in that hotel. While you were incapacitated, he took control of the village. 2 days ago, your condition degenerated to the point that the silencing seals on the insubordinate genin failed as well as the quarantine seal. Thankfully, Shimura-sama put up real prisoner containment seals as soon he was informed of your poor condition. And the Hokage? There has been no news from the IWA front. A very bad thing? I believe so. Shimura-sama wished to meet with you as soon as you were conscious. I groaned. What does he need me for? I don't know, but apparently it's urgent, he'll be here soon. I started to cough wetly. ISE quickly rolled me onto my side and pressed a cloth over my mouth. I took the cloth from his hand as the coughs racked my entire body. When I pulled the cloth away, there was a sizable glob of yellowish mucus. How in the 9 circles of hell did I get a lung infection? I demanded weakly as ISE wrapped the cloth in another and carried it away. I'm not exactly sure, kiddo, but Shimura-sama will be here soon. I hate this. A knock sounded at the door. Come in, ISE responded. The door opened slowly to reveal Danzo in the Jonin uniform. Uzumaki-san, he greeted quietly. I pushed myself into a mock sitting position. ISE stood up and quickly left the room before Danzo could say anything. Don't you have a village I screwed up to fix? I asked as scathingly as I could manage. He sat down in the chair without a word. Stop being creepy, what the hell do you want? He held up my mission scroll and placed it in my lap. Open it. Screw that shit, I'm not in charge anymore. I was surprised he didn't cut off my incredibly slow speech in frustration. The IWAM alliance defeated the Konoha forces the day before the Hokage arrived on the front. He walked into a trap. I expected him to at least be patronizing, maybe even cruel, but he just seemed tired. I can barely breathe and I can't even defend myself, the hell can I do about it? Open the scroll. Why? I need to confirm something. The man seemed like he was about to snap from stress. Not snap the violent, explosive way, but the sad way that left people a shadow of themselves. He was all but begging me, something I did not expect from him of all people. My fingers didn't respond as they were supposed to while I struggled to unroll it, but eventually I managed. My head swam afterwards as Danzo picked it up and read it, sagging in relief. I don't want to know whatever the hell got you worked up. Please tell me that was all you needed. I'm sorry, kid, but there's a few more things. IWA has officially won the war and they are escorting those they captured back to Konoha to make their demands. The majority of the troops are under orders to scatter and return in a few weeks. The Hokage has refused to give any other details, but included orders to fake your death. Except for myself, Uzumaki-san, and 2 ANBU who can be trusted without reservation, everyone is under the impression that your condition is continuing to degenerate from an unknown illness, which is mostly true. None of the doctors have been able to figure out your illness and you are not out of danger yet. I rolled my eyes, but before I could respond, another coughing fit racked my body. Danzo pressed a clean cloth against my mouth and quickly helped me roll onto my side. When the fit subsided, Danzo tucked the soiled cloth away in a cloth bag that dangled from the bedside table. Make sure you wash your hands once you leave, I advised. And I'm not going to die from this. Give me 2 weeks and I'll be back to normal. There's just a bunch of fluid in my lungs. It'll clear in time. You know of this illness? Yes, I'm calling it pneumonia. That's hardly comforting. There is still the matter of faking your death. Do what you want, I can't stop you. I'm going to be laid up for several more days. If you want it to be convincing, have 3 or 4 of the other Uzumaki kids fall ill as well, but make sure Kushina and Nagato are among them. They're going to be major targets if I'm supposedly taken out of the picture, and you'll need to have them under wraps where they can be protected. Why must the ruse be expanded? Because no one challenges a tragedy. I've caused too many problems for too many people. They'll want irrefutable confirmation of my death, like a body, that you won't be able to produce. Just do it, and you might want to have one of them fall ill very soon, otherwise it won't. I broke off in an increasingly violent coughing fit. When it was over, Danzo looked even more shaken than before. I'm recalling Tsunade-chan and Biwako-san. You're really going to die at this rate. Stop! I wheezed, barely catching his sleeve as he tried to sweep out of the room. If you bring either of them back, they're as good as dead, considering they're the 2 closest people to the Hokage. I'll be fine, I promise. It sounds a lot worse than it actually is. If worst comes to worst, I can direct a medic to treat it, but that's a last resort. Boy! Danzo snarled at me, his temper exploding without warning. Until I, the only fit individual of this village's council, can be sure no one is pulling Hiruzen strings, you are the ultimate power of this village, bedridden or not, and if you are dead, there's no wriggling out of whatever treaty IWA forces us to sign. Normally, the cornerstone of this village numbers nearly 500 solid A-rank jonin at any given time. Right now, there are 5 shinobi in this village capable of fighting at any level. Little old me bluffed the 7 swordsmen into cornering themselves in a civilian hotel for heaven's sake. And look where that put you. This is a total fluke and bad luck in my part, I swear. He eyed me dubiously. How did you get all this information and orders anyways, especially since the Hokage is apparently captured? Hatake-san and another individual have learned some bad habits from you and have been doing their best to exchange information. However, IWA is taking no chances with Hokage as their prisoner, and Hatake doesn't work miracles. Why is the Hokage ordering you to fake my death? That is unknown. Then we're not going to, because if IWA wants something to do with me, it'll only cause problems later when they find out they were tricked. If it was that important to deny them access to me, he would have just ordered my death. You shouldn't. My life, my call. You can't just take orders for once in your life? No, I can't. Sick or not, there's no reason for me to fake die. That you know of. I'll take my chances. You're not seeing sense. No, you're emotionally compromised and too hung up on tricking IWA into making an invalid agreement. We still have their people prisoner and we have better sealing techniques. Fuinjutsu is not a cure-all. No, but it gives us leverage to make the terms more favorable. How long until they get here? A few days. Then find my sister or someone else who knows seals and secure anything or anyone IWA would want, and attach it to a dead man's seal. Put it on the ground just inside the front gate and make it visible. They'll push the Hokage into a supposed trap first and he'll activate the switch. Bam, bargaining power. And if it doesn't work? Iwa's won and we accept that. There's no reason to be a sore loser. We held them off for this entire war with a quarter of the troops they have. That's a damn good accomplishment. This isn't a playground, there is no sportsmanship. Really? In comparison to the other countries, what's our death toll? Because of our medics, we'll be able to recover a good majority of our injured. The other countries won't. We'll be back to full strength before anyone else because we have a large group of younger nin who, with training, can step up and take the slack. I had more to say, but it was cut off by the worst coughing fit so far. You need help, boy. No! I gasped. Play the long-term game. A bruised pride and a little strategic kowtowing will be much less damaging than broken agreements, you know this. Have you no pride? I laughed weakly. I have pride and arrogance by the truckload, old man, but I also have people I care about. It's not about being stronger. I don't care whether people know when I'm running circles around them, I'm just content knowing I am. IWA didn't win this war, they kicked us while we were down. That's not a victory, and we know it. Right now, we might have all the strength of a toddler with candy. They can steal the candy and knock us down, but they don't know it was just cardboard or that the tears are fake until everything is all said and done. Again, this isn't some schoolyard fight. That's where you're wrong. People don't grow up, Shimura-san. The words change and their actions have a bigger effect, but it's still the same fights. Suna wanted Konoha's candy, so Suna started the fight, then Kumo wanted a different piece of candy from Konoha, so they started a fight. IWA had a grudge because it didn't get Konoha's candy last time, so they wanted it this time. Kiri wanted to share candy with Konoha, but Konoha was mad because they smashed their candy earlier, so Kiri decided to team up with Suna because they thought Konoha was being mean. Konoha took Suna, Kiri, and Kumo's candy, but IWA whacked them from behind and took that candy for themselves. Konoha is going to be smarter than IWA and hide their candy, then leave IWA to take the candy Konoha stole from everyone else. End of story. You have a strange way of looking at things. Kids find the adults' fights just as silly as the adults find the children's squabbling, they just can't articulate it. The only difference is that the adults' fights are dangerous and they have no one to slap them on the wrist and say enough to. He started to respond, but another coughing fit took over me. You need to rest, he told me when I didn't immediately roll onto my back. I cannot in good conscience ignore the Hokage's order, but I will compromise with your point of view. I will make it appear as if I am covering up your death. A double bluff. Nice. Chapter 28. A few minutes after Danzo left, ISE returned and started to take my vitals. I leave for half an hour and you nearly suffocate yourself trying to speak, ISE grumbled. Since you apparently have the best idea of what's wrong, I'd welcome your opinion. I opened my mouth to speak, but ISE held up a hand. No, your lips are already blue and your fever is nearly dangerous. Write it down. He held up a piece of paper and a pencil. It didn't take much effort for him to help maneuver me into a position where I could use the bedside table to scribble down everything I could remember about treating lung infections. You seem to know exactly what to do. I shrugged and collapsed back, completely exhausted. I missed some time, because the next thing I knew, I was being sat up and a glass of cool water was being held to my lips. It burned on the way down and tasted like dirt, but I didn't care. I was thirstier than I expected. I passed out after I finished the glass. Straight face. I didn't bother trying to fully wake up whenever ISE dragged me into some semblance of cognition and persuaded me to breathe deeply and cough out as much of the gunk in my lungs as I could. When his voice changed to someone else's urgent tone, I dragged myself into full wakefulness and punched at the face that was certainly not ISE. Whoever it was knocked the swing to the side. They said something, pressing a hand over my mouth to keep me from shouting, and pinned me down. I tried to suck in air through my nose, but at some point while I slept, my nose had clogged. They hissed in my ear as I tried to kick at the person holding me down, but it had no effect. Blood pounded through my head, drowning out their words. The person lifted their hand, and I immediately turned my head to the side and coughed violently while medical chakra rushed through my body, an unfamiliar brown-haired woman leaning over me. While she spoke unintelligibly, I caught sight of ISE slumped in his chair, automatically starting to thrash and struggle while they held me down. My hand closed around the pencil beneath my pillow. I used it to channel chakra in the form of a scalpel before slashing at the person nearest my hand. They muffled a yelp as the blade sunk into their hip and would have kept going through their body if they hadn't slapped my hand away with enough force to break my thumb and probably fracture several carpals. I wanted to scream with pain and try and draw someone's attention, but I couldn't spare the air as I forced myself to breathe evenly. "Calm down, Kichiro," the man hissed, his hand closing around my injured one and squeezing. Pain shot up my arm. "It's me, Sakumo." His face hovered above mine, but I couldn't make out any details beyond white hair. I would have stopped struggling, but their weight on my torso made it impossible for me to breathe. "What's wrong with him?" Sakumo demanded, and medical chakra flooded my body again. "He's suffocating." The woman finally figured out, and instantly, the weight was gone, but her hand remained on my chest, forcing my lungs to painfully expand and contract. "Stop!" I managed after a few forced breaths, and she immediately pulled her hand away so I could grab the folded cloth in the bedside table and cough up whatever was dislodged in my lungs during the struggle. It was far longer and more painful than any previous coughing fit. Halfway through, the woman switched the soiled cloth with a clean one. When the fit subsided, I rubbed my eyes until they were clear and glared up at the white-haired man hovering worriedly. It only took me a second to recognize Sakumo. "The hell?" I wheezed. "What did you do to him?" I demanded, pointing at ISE. At least I could speak in full sentences until my lungs started to fill again. My chest ached from coughing. I curled around my broken hand, not listening for the answer. For my age and rank, I had a decent pain tolerance, but I was too overwhelmed by the massive amount of input flooding into my brain and didn't even want to try to process it. "Wake the man up, Hatake," the woman ordered. "Kichiro-kun will take far too long to calm down otherwise." A few murmured words later, ISE sat down beside me and pulled me into his lap. I recentered myself by listening to ISE's steady heartbeat, leading him to do the talking. "IWA will arrive in 4 days, and they've already formulated their list of demands as well as drawn up a treaty which they will undoubtedly force the Hokage to sign," Sakumo began. The woman carefully extricated my hand and began to heal it. "With all due respect, Hatake-san, I don't believe I should be privy to this information," ISE said. "Probably not, Uzumaki-san, but this concerns Kichiro and you have a right to know. Before I continue, I need both of you to understand that if anyone outside this room knows Biwako-sama and I were here, our lives are forfeit. That being said, Iwa's terms have already been decided." I took the liberty of memorizing their list. It was unexpectedly short and very revealing. Along with the usual payments and shift of clientele and trade balance, IWA added several additional demands. In an attempt to ensure that it will be a long time before Konoha will be able to challenge IWA again, they have named several children of influential village leaders to be delivered as hostages. Namely, the primary heir of each the Uchiha, Hyuga, Aburame, and Akimichi clans, as well as the last surviving child of the Senju clan and the Hokage's son. The clans would never stand for that. Ise exclaimed. Considering each of those clan heads is currently Iwa's hostage, their choice is to comply or die. The Hokage has no choice but to order them to comply, otherwise they will lose a half-dozen high-level jonin as well as a handful of genin. Alongside the return of prisoners, IWA has demanded that Kichiro be handed over as a prisoner of war. I stiffened and Ise's arms tightened around me. You know as well as I what they do to those people, Ise growled. And of the nations, they have the worst treatment of Jinchuriki, second only to Suna. If the Yamanaka does their job properly, IWA will never know Kichiro contains the QB. Medics are extremely valuable. They won't torture the boy. If anything, they'll force him to either teach his techniques to their medics and Fuinjutsu experts or make him do the work himself. That did not placate Ise the slightest. The Hokage hasn't made his decision yet, but he will most likely concede so long as IWA promises to treat their prisoners fairly and provides a set amount of time the heirs and Kichiro will be held. Everything seemed to go cold. He's your student, Hatake. How dare you even think, Chunin or not, the boy is 9. You know him, you've taught him. He's not a fighter, he doesn't deserve that. No, the child doesn't deserve it, but there's nothing that can be done, short of kidnapping him and forcing him into the life of a missing nin as my hostage instead, a path that will only end with him recaptured. Stop, I croaked, coughing weakly. Tell the Hokage I'll agree to the demand as long as there are no other prisoners on either side. The average length of prisoner of war internment is 7 years. I will cooperate with IWA for that time, no longer. If those terms are not met, it doesn't matter how much pain he causes me, I will not go. I will fight the order with everything I have. I didn't look at Sakumo, I just stared straight ahead, trying to ignore my own trembling. Kichiro, Sakumo said, but broke off, reaching into his pouch and pulling out a scroll and held it out. Gingerly, I took it and opened it. Though I had never seen one before, I immediately recognized it as a summoning scroll. My eyes widened in shock. My summons fight, they hunt, and I know you wouldn't appreciate it, so I found another contract for you. The scroll was blank, no one had signed. You can use your chakra, right? Do you have enough for a summoning? I nodded and held tight to Ise's knee to lower myself to the ground. It wasn't exactly safe to attempt a new jutsu while touching other people. Sakumo rattled off the hand seals and a brief description of how it was supposed to work. I signed the scroll and made the hand signs, channeling as much chakra as I could into the technique while remaining mostly functional. A small bird appeared flying directly at me. I yelped, but it banked at the last second, orbiting my head twice at an insane speed, creating a blur of gray across my vision, before landing on the hand I belatedly brought up to shield my face. Its claws dug into the skin, drawing blood. The white stripe beneath each of its wings was shaped like an hourglass, which I found extremely interesting. It studied me closely with a beady, gold-rimmed eye. A mockingbird? I breathed. I hadn't seen one since I left my old world. Greetings, young one, the bird trilled. Hi. The bird pecked at the inside of my wrist, drawing blood. When I realized what it was about to do, I jerked. I began, but the bird licked at the welling blood. I stemmed the flow with my thumb, careful not to jostle the bird's perch. You're quite sick, the bird commented. Yes, I responded, dipping into my dangerously low chakra to heal the wound before whatever nasties the bird picked up could infect it. It was stupid for you to attempt a summoning in your condition. Not really. The bird's head tipped to the side. Did you just contradict me? No, I mitigated your statement. The bird eyed me carefully. Most who attempt to summon us grovel. Forgive me, but I won't grovel for someone's approval. I am canon. Kichiro. I would like to know how you recognize my kind. That is a very long story I don't have the breath to share. Curious. What did you just say? I asked, not sure if I heard the bird speaking English. Big brother is watching you. The bird taunted and vanished in a puff of smoke. That wasn't funny, I shivered. Kichiro? Sakumo asked, kneeling down beside me. What does buying a wand and anti-totalitarianism have to do with each other? I asked the air. Sakumo helped me onto the bed while I pondered the question. That was a little creepy, but otherwise I think it went well, I smiled as I sat down. As if to prove me wrong, it initiated another coughing fit. Will they approve the contract? Sakumo asked. Most likely, but I think I picked up a stalker in the meantime. What? He deadpanned. Harry Potter in 1984, I explained. It took me a long second to realize he couldn't know what I was referring to. Sorry, they're stories I read. Sakumo rolled his eyes and I flopped back onto the bed. The motion was a big mistake. It dislodged a piece of the gunk in my lungs and I was rolling over to cough a second later, taking the cloth offered to me by unseen hands. When I finished, I rolled onto my back. I hate being sick, I moaned. The woman's chakra cautiously examined my lungs and air passages. I might be able to draw out the congestion like a poison, but it might be too thick. I'd welcome you to try, but not unless you can prove to me you won't collapse my lung in the process, because I won't survive that. You won't survive this illness. Why won't anyone believe me when I say I'm going to be fine? I demanded half-heartedly and tightened my grip on whoever was holding my hand. She caught pneumonia once and the worst of it had passed within a few days. I wasn't so sure of my survival anymore, since, according to ISE, I had been this bad for close to a week. Maybe it was plague. That was a scary thought and I forced it out of my mind. There was absolutely nothing I could do about it anyways. Someone has to balance out your ridiculous optimism and it's your fault it takes everyone else to do so. Sakumo snapped back. I started to laugh, but quickly remembered why that was a very bad idea when it turned into a hacking cough. May I talk to my student alone for a minute? Sakumo asked softly. The others respectfully cleared the room. As soon as the door closed behind ISE, Sakumo fell heavily to his knees beside my bed. That summon was supposed to be a songbird, he began with false lightheartedness. It is. It's just a songbird from my world. Songbirds don't speak your crazy language. Kato Dan speaks my crazy language and he's legit, so it's not crazy. He died 2 weeks ago when IWA surprised a routine patrol. It took a long time for that to sink in. Who else is dead? I croaked. Takumi died in that same attack, and Shimizu hasn't contacted since he left to infiltrate AIM, he is presumed dead. Inazuka died from injuries and Kiri. The whole team, I choked. While you were in Kumo, the Hokage's students faced off against Hanzo the Salamander. No one has heard from them since. At best, they're hiding in AIM, recovering, at worst they've been taken hostage. Anyone else? I figured there was an off-chance Jiraiya picked up Yahiko and Konan, though he likely wouldn't teach them anything shinobi-related without Nagato and his Rinnegan to tip the scales. I don't know, everyone is too scattered and the Jonin communications have been compromised. You're going back out there. I have to do what I can. I only came here to pass information, give you that summoning scroll I found, and see if Biwako-sama could help you. So, I'm not going to see you again for a while? I respect your decision, but you have no idea what it's going to be like in IWA. No, I probably don't, but I don't exactly have a choice either. At least it will be on my terms and it will be my decision. Thank you for telling me. You shouldn't even be involved. I've been involved since I grabbed those kids in Yuzu and ran. I've been involved since I was sitting in that Goron boat trying to unlock my chakra and drive the boat to shore. I owe it to you, Kichiro, to at least offer to hide you until this is over. You've paid any debt you may have to this village several times over. There's an order of priestesses not far from here that are willing to take you in until you turn 16. We both know the Hokage won't come after you for it. It was a tempting offer, but I knew it would be wrong to accept, even if it had been passively approved. I opened my mouth to say no, but Sakumo held up a hand. Look, I know you see yourself as an adult, and you probably are, mentally. What you don't seem to understand is that all the maturity and intellect you have was gained in an entirely different world, culture, and language. Then, you might have technically been a soldier, but you lived a civilian life. You had a foot in both worlds. You can manage your finances, feed yourself, entertain yourself, but there's a hell of a lot more and less to the life of a combatant. I don't want to hear this. You're going to listen. I don't care how old and wise you think you are, you're just arrogant, bitter, and naive, Kichiro. In your world, the atrocities committed were atrocities. Here, they are a part of everyday life and you just don't understand that. I sat up and turned my back on him. Please leave. As you like to say, make me. He waited for me to try, but I didn't move. Even healthy and at full strength, I couldn't force Sakumo into anything he didn't want to do. You're trying to scare me into backing down. It's not going to work. You're right, if the Hokage can't intimidate you with that seal, I'm not going to stand a chance, but I can humble you and try to persuade you to change your mind. I felt him sit down on the other side. Maybe you've figured it out, maybe you haven't, but a lot of people monitored your training. Your sister was placed in classes and with a sensei that would help her become a powerful frontline fighter. With her chakra reserves, she'll be an impressive ninjutsu specialist. With that genius Namikaze at her side, they'll be ridiculously strong, given a few years. Within the first few months at the academy, her specialization was already decided. Yours was decided the second you were apprenticed to me, but you signed up to become a medic instead. I know all this already. Most people would leap at the chance to do the impossible, like spit fire and throw massive gusts of air. You didn't, you chose to fix people. There's nothing wrong with that, I retorted defensively, suppressing a cough. In the eyes of the people monitoring your training, it was a problem. They wanted you to throw around powerful ninjutsu, they wanted someone who could wipe out an enemy team in seconds. They got a medic. The fact that you were a damn good one, as good as those with 10 times your experience, didn't matter. They threatened to place you with someone who would make you learn ninjutsu. I know all of this, what's your point? The council didn't care how it was done, they wanted you to be their pet child jonin. They wanted everyone to know the Uzumaki were still alive and loyal to only Konoha, it didn't matter that what made them great was lost. What's your point? I demanded. Tell me, could you kill someone in cold blood? I didn't answer. No, I don't think you could. You're different now, I can tell, but when faced with a defeated opponent, I don't think you could ever kill them. In a real fight, not the petty skirmishes you've been in, you wouldn't be able to intentionally kill someone. I've watched your fights, and all of your kills have been reflexive accidents. You hit harder than you intended, the poison on your senbon killed them, you misaimed and struck their neck instead of across their shoulder blades with your sticks, or simply got a lucky hit to their ribs that eventually killed them. All the other skirmishes you've been in have ended with me or Inuzuka killing your incapacitated opponent. I assumed that those I'd beat had been taken hostage and it stung to find out otherwise. You have 6 confirmed kills, he stated tonelessly. That's the lowest of all active shinobi, only excluding a very small handful of genin who haven't been out of the village yet. It was a long time before he spoke again. My point is this, in this world, you are an arrogant, naive, bitter, disrespectful, ignorant child. Even so, you're the kind of person the leadership of this village needs. If you come back from IWA, and at this point, it is extremely unlikely, you won't be the same person. You'll come back as cold and heartless as anyone else. No, I won't come back cold, I swear. There is no way the Hokage will be able to negotiate your fair treatment. At best, you'll be worked half to death. At worst, you'll be tortured for information. Everyone you meet there will hate you simply for existing. You're wrong. You're too soft. That such a kid has no sense of kindness or fairness like the Hokage does. Stop! In an instant, Sakumo was in front of me, roughly grabbing a fistful of my hair and forcing me to look up at him. I closed my eyes to the pain, clutching his wrist weakly. You were actively in charge of this village for 24 hours. Before that time, you would have stared down anyone who resorted to physical violence to make their point, yet now you're cowering in front of me, unwilling to retort. You would never have curled against anyone like a child, yet you cling to ISE like a toddler. You would never have allowed me to talk down to you, yet you're not even trying to stop me. Stop, please. I knew Sakumo could be cruel, but that was something he reserved for enemies, not me. You can't even handle a long overdue upbraiding. Where's your smart, philosophical retort, your opposing opinion with obscure evidence to back it up? Why aren't you analyzing, rationalizing my behavior, grinning at some supposedly obvious flaw in my reasoning? I just shrank away from him. Why aren't you contradicting me simply because you can? He hissed in my face and released me. I shot to my feet, grabbing the front of Sakumo's vest and shoving him back the 2 steps until his back hit the wall, and he just let me. My head spun at the exertion, but I ignored it. I don't antagonize people for the hell of it, I attack them because they refuse to recognize their mistakes, because they're wrong. I'm antagonistic, yes, but only if it gets me somewhere. I don't fight for the sake of fighting. Yes, since I brought ISE and his family back to Konoha, I've changed, but it's not like you've been here to see it. Sure, it's immature, but ISE is the closest thing to a parent I've ever had. He's always kind no matter what, simply because it's the right thing to do, which is more than can be said about you. I barely managed to suppress a cough, turning my back and laying down on the hospital bed, facing away from him. No, I'm not going to fight and argue with you simply because you want me to. You're absolutely right. I'm a coward, I'm immature, infantile, arrogant, naive, self-righteous, petty, rude, weak, irresponsible, hypocritical, you name it, but I still care. I care about the children here, genin, chunin, orphan, student, I care about them, they're someone's child, whether that someone is the strongest shinobi in the village or a disowned teenager who abandoned the kid at birth. If ruining myself is what it takes to save them from the same fate, then I'll do it. I'm begging you to reconsider. No. Kichiro. No! I cried, flipping over and sliding off the bed to kneel at his feet. Please stop asking, begging, persuading, demanding, threatening, intimidating me. I can't change my answer. I broke off, unable to breathe, and for once, it wasn't because I was sick. Sakumo slowly sank to his knees as well, defeated. I understand why, but I can't agree with you. I'll respect your decision. It was a Pyrrhic victory. Chapter 29. 2 days of steady deterioration later, I was forced to attempt medical ninjutsu on myself to forcibly sustain a high enough fever to kill whatever pathogen assaulted me. It wasn't the most elegant of solutions, but it worked, even if it nearly killed me in the process. Several hours later, the disease halted and I began to steadily improve. The only person I saw during that time was ISE. I never left the small hospital room, not even to go to the bathroom. It was absolutely humiliating to be too weak to even control my own bowels. After another day, I regained enough strength to begin to heal myself. Unless he left while I was asleep, ISE stayed with me the entire time. Danzo returned at the end of that day, looking grave and carrying my uniform in a neatly folded stack and a pack slung over his shoulder. I don't know how he managed it, but Hiruzen haggled the terms extremely close to what Hatake-san said you would agree to and managed to delay Iwa's arrival by a day and a half to give you just enough time to recover. ISE quickly turned to leave, uncomfortable with shinobi talk, but Danzo stopped him. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. He murmured. There was something else I didn't quite catch. ISE nodded once and the door swung closed behind him. The terms? I asked, standing up and taking the clothes while he dropped the pack on the bed. Danzo sat down and stared at the floor. I took the hint and started to change out of the loose, overlarge hospital clothes and into my uniform and haori. Someone had cleaned and polished my attire for the first time since I received it. When I finished and rustled through the pack, confirming everything I needed was present, Danzo spoke. You will spend several years in IWA as a part of a one-sided shinobi exchange program. Somehow, IWA found out about the fact that you can control the Kyubi and are under the impression that you taught the Hachibi Jinchuriki to do the same. They are unaware that you have any knowledge of Fuinjutsu. And there will be no prisoners on either side, correct? The Hokage's son will accompany you, but the two of you should remain together and will be treated fairly. IWA is only interested in gaining Konoha's strengths. You embody two of them and the Kekkei Jinkai are out of their reach. No matter how weak Konoha is, we are still theoretically able to force the three other countries we have defeated to turn against them should they pose a legitimate threat of stealing our secrets or people as their own. IWA decided to play it safe. I didn't agree to any other hostages. If you cooperate, you might be able to persuade them to send the boy home early. Years are a long time. They want to subvert your loyalty. If they can persuade you to join their side, they gain a powerful mind as well as a Jinchuriki. It's not like they can succeed. No, the seal on your forehead makes sure of that, but they don't know that. The Hokage passed this message through Hatake-san. Danzo held out a small square of paper to me, covered with the Hokage's handwriting. It was an explanation of the situation and ended with a polite request to behave myself. There was no signature. He continued after I finished the message. While you were asleep, you were given an ANBU tattoo, which is actually a seal, for several reasons. First, the official stance on your whereabouts will be that you are on a top-secret mission rather than confirming that you are in IWA. Second, as soon as the Hokage activates it, you will be added to the shadow ranks and should you die, it will notify the Hokage immediately and destroy your body. Finally, it will prevent questioning of skills you want to keep to yourself. The Tsuchikage is under the impression that ANBU members are unable to share restricted techniques, even when tortured. The suicide aspect of the seal was not included in yours. No other seals were placed on you without your knowledge. I was not happy to learn that, but the expression on Danzo's face told me it was one of those things no one would apologize for and I would just have to deal with. I would never have consented to joining ANBU if I had the ghost of a choice. He finished his instructions with, "Meet me at the gate in 1 hour, I will bring your bag. Unless you absolutely must speak with someone, do not reveal yourself to anyone but the adults in your family. They are the only ones cleared to know of your true whereabouts, and you may disclose the entire situation to them. Impress upon them that until they are notified otherwise, they are not to breathe a word of the situation, not even among themselves. Do secure the room as I'm sure Hatake-san taught you." I nodded once and he showed me to the roof where I took off. It didn't take long for me to reach the Uzumaki house under a henge. It was shortly after midnight according to the moon. I slipped into the top level of the house and took a minute to catch my breath before swinging down the empty space where the unsafe staircase had been taken out. Minato and Kushina were curled together in one corner of the second floor. Several candles burned around the room, lighting it so there were no shadows near them. Downstairs, I could hear Ise waking Fuso and the two of them moving to the living room. Minato's back was pressed against the wall and Kushina's face was pressed into his chest. They each had fistfuls of the other's shirts. I hugged the wall and stepped into the ring of light. Cautiously, I knocked on the wall to wake them up. Minato shot upright, groggy. It only took him a second to recognize me. "Kai!" he cried and tried to release a non-existent Jinjutsu, just to be sure. I flinched as the chakra washed over me, but didn't move. He roughly shook Kushina's shoulder to wake her. "I need to talk to you both," I murmured and gestured towards the giant hole in the floor. Without waiting to see if they would follow, I backed away and swung down to the first floor, heading straight for the living room. They caught up as I was opening the door. I didn't meet anyone's eyes as they sat down in the circle of furniture, and I closed the door while activating the security seals. Kushina left a place open for me beside her, but I sat in a separate chair, staring at the ground between us. How much do you know about the situation with IWA? I glanced at Fuso and ISE. Only ISE seemed to know what was going on, the rest were only confused. What do you know? I repeated softly, unable to look up. There's an information blackout, Nissan. No one knows anything about what's going on outside of the village. Since this isn't the official story that will be released to the public, none of what I tell you now is to leave this room or be spoken about after I finish. I told them bluntly. Konoha lost the war. Silence answered me. The Hokage left to fight on the war front, but at that point, the war was already lost and he walked into a trap. When no one spoke, I continued. Because of that, there are reparations to pay. The silence continued. I stood up and started to pace. They were extremely specific about what they wanted. Minato figured it out first, a leap in logic only a genius like him could make. Stop it! No, they can't. He shot to his feet as if burned and lurched towards the door. I stepped in his way before he made it a full step and he attempted to punch me in the gut, but I caught him by the wrist. He followed through with a swing at my face. I knocked it to the side and put a hand on Minato's chest. Calm down, I ordered him. He relaxed and slumped back down beside Kushina. Injuring me isn't going to change anything. What's going on? What are you talking about? Kushina asked, standing up. I sat down and rubbed my face. I'm going to IWA and it's going to be a long time before I come back. That was a nice way to put it, right? No! Kushina shrieked. I flinched backwards at the sudden volume. The decision's been made and the treaty will be signed as soon as Shimura-san and I reach the IWA camp. Nissan, you can't. None of this is your fault because never did anything to IWA, Tebane. You haven't hurt anyone. Kushina. Stop it! Stop it! She shrieked. It's not right and you know it. I stayed seated, staring at the ground between my feet. You're right, it's wrong to demand someone's political imprisonment, especially that of someone who committed no war crimes. That doesn't change the fact that it still is. I can handle it. The last 3 times you were in a public confrontation in this village, it left you incapacitated, Minato reasoned. Come on, I'm only a Chunin, do you really expect me to be in decent condition after successfully neutralizing Jonin? I probably should have looked up at Minato for that comment, but I couldn't look them in the eye and tell them they were right, that I made my decision, and nothing could be changed. Then how are you still alive? I'm extremely lucky. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Minato's fists clench around his knees. You can't leave, Kushina pleaded. I stood up, but still didn't look up at them. If not me then who? Anyone, she murmured. A child? What are you talking about? Originally, IWA demanded the heirs of the Sarutobi, Uchiha, Hyuga, Akimichi, Aburame, and Senju clans. All except the Hyuga and Uchiha heirs are your age or younger. Then let the Uchiha and Hyuga deal with it. You don't mean that, Kushina. Yes, I do. Kushina. No, for once, I mean it and you can't tell me otherwise, Tebane. You've worked so hard to take care of me, Kachan, Tuchan, Nagato, Minato, you can't just abandon us like Jiraiya-sensei did. I looked up at her sharply. I am not. You are. Minato retorted, standing up and getting in my face. He was right, I was abandoning them, but if I stayed, I could eventually fail them in a worse way. With me as a high-profile prisoner, they would be less of a high-profile target so they could train for several years, and hopefully be seen as nothing more than collateral damage during the war, worthless except through their affiliation to me. I had found a new hobby in leading people to underestimate me, and the people I cared about, over the course of this war. Self-deprecation with a realist's vocabulary did wonders in manipulating perceptions. You're an insensitive jerk, you know that? Minato spat in my face, standing on tiptoes to reach my height. He was rather obviously acting, and I had been called that and worse enough times that it didn't bother me. Though, it was a bit unnerving to see a kid doing his absolute desperate best to hurt and guilt me into attempting to pull off the impossible, even though he had to have known it wouldn't have worked. I am now aware, I answered neutrally. Minato was somewhat naive, but not so much as to know that even if I disagreed with the Hokage, the treaty, or the effectiveness of the solution enough to go back on my word, nothing would have come of it. He was aiming for something else, but I couldn't quite figure it out. They shared a look, confirming the suspicion and indicating that Kushina was in on whatever he was thinking. There was some kind of code to the way they shifted and fidgeted, but I didn't comment. Minato faltered, but managed to keep up the anger act as I stared him down. I'm not going to argue with you, Minato. Stop it! He shrieked at me. I took a sharp step backwards, sensitive to the noise after spending days with no noise other than quiet conversation and coughing. The back of my leg hit the chair and it skidded backwards a few inches. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Minato, calm down, I responded quietly. No! You're just standing there like nothing is wrong. There's nothing that can be done. I don't care. I actually flinched at that. He didn't have to fake the anger anymore. You know this is wrong. He shoved me backwards a step and the chair skidded back another foot. I am aware. Then why aren't you doing anything? Why are you just standing there? He pushed me again. You're just being cruel, careless, and cowardly. He shoved me hard enough to knock me into the chair, sliding it backwards at least 2 feet. I'm not going to fight you, Minato. Why not? Why don't you ever fight back? I'm not going to fight you. Why? He all but screamed in my face. No matter what I say, you're not going to be satisfied. I won't argue with you. Please just let it go. Cautiously, I stood up. It's not going to work, Minato, Kushina murmured to him. Nissan, she broke off and turned away for a moment. I swore to myself that I wouldn't get upset or frustrated with them, but they were testing that resolve. In a sick, twisted way, it was funny to watch them attempt the good cop bad cop manipulation technique. Nissan, we need you here. I hesitated before responding. No, you don't. Between them, ISE and Fuso are capable of doing everything I can do except fight. But they're not the same. We've talked about this. In our line of work, missions can last for years at a time. Just think of my absence as a mission, okay? You're a medic. This isn't supposed to happen. I'll be fine, and I'll come back in a few years. I promise. You can't promise that. I glanced over at ISE and Fuso, but they were murmuring to each other by the door. I respected them enough not to eavesdrop. Kushina lunged forward like she was about to hug me. I barely saw the glint of metal in time before she tried to stab me with what I assumed to be a poisoned senbon. I caught her wrist and twisted it, forcing her to turn around and lean backwards precariously with a pained hiss. I took the senbon out of Kushina's hand and tossed it up into the ceiling. Minato jerked towards me, and I dragged Kushina between us. Goodbye, I murmured sadly. I untwisted her arm, released her, and walked away. I paused at the door long enough to give ISE a hug and let Fuso kiss the top of my head. With slow, deliberate movements, I took the keys from the necklace my dog tags dangled on and pressed them into ISE's hand. Come back, kiddo, we love you, ISE said as I opened the door. I love you too, I responded softly, briefly meeting their eyes before looking at the 2 genin in the middle of the room. When they didn't look up, I closed the door behind me. Straight face. I had plenty of time before I was supposed to meet with Danzo at the gate, so I walked the longer, mostly forested route to the gate with my hands in my pockets, Hatake clutched in my fist. I barely noticed the bird dive-bombing my face in time to dodge. I recognized the white streak through its wings and held out my arm for the summon to land on. The bird's talons thankfully didn't pierce the gloves I wore to cover the seals on my hands as it landed and eyed me carefully. "Kanon-san," I greeted evenly. "Was the surprise attack really necessary?" "Sumi, it's difficult to aim when I summon myself. I suppose you have something important to tell me? The mockingbirds have accepted you as their summoner." "I am honored." I continued walking towards the gate. "Do all of you speak English?" "Yes, but you will only be summoning me." "That's fine. I don't need anything right now, but thank you for informing me I've been accepted. I think I'll stay for a while." The summon realm gets dull. The bird hopped onto my shoulder. I leaned away. The impossible amount of chakra the bird had was overwhelming. "Get used to it," the bird snapped in my ear. I ignored her and tied the hataite over my forehead. "Uzumaki-san," Danzo greeted me at the gate when I arrived. The two other council members stood beside him, and a genin I assumed to be the Hokage's son sitting on a bench behind them. "Shimura-san," I responded evenly. "I don't like this arrangement." "No one does. I have enough men to take the IWA encampment. Do you have enough to finish this war if those who were forced to scatter are unable to return?" His jaw clenched. "I didn't think so." "What's with the bird?" he asked. "Summon." I'd never seen that type of bird before. "I'm special." "This man founded Root," Cannon snapped. "Don't trust him. He's founded Root, but it hasn't gone rogue yet." "What are you saying?" One of the council members, the woman, snapped. "Nothing that involves you," I retorted. "She helped Root pass under the radar." "Okay, that comment involves you and it wouldn't be wise of me to repeat it. You have more attitude than can possibly be healthy." And that was a snipe at me. "You are going to get yourself killed with that tongue." "All right, the bird needs to shut it." "The bird needs to shut it," Cannon mocked. "Summons are supposed to be subservient to their summoner," Danzo scolded. "Yeah, well, I don't care, so the old man can shut it as well." "The old man can shut it as well," Cannon mocked both of us. The genin leaned around the female council member whose name I could never remember and gaped at me and Cannon. "The sooner we leave, the sooner I can get this over with." Danzo snatched my bag off the bench and threw it at me, grabbed the genin's arm, and slung the boy's bag over his shoulder. After a glance at me, he led the way out of the village, through the chunin and jonin guarding the walls. The other two council members stayed behind. Straight face. No one spoke as Danzo led the way through the forests surrounding the village. The Hokage's son appeared terrified out of his mind. He kept stumbling and trying to hang back while Danzo pulled him along. After 5 minutes, I grew sick of it and stepped forwards to sling my arm around the boy's shoulder and pinch Danzo's hand to force him to let go. "Hey, I'm Kichiro," I greeted, holding out a hand to shake his. "Itsuki," he responded uncertainly, cringing slightly underneath my arm. "What's your favorite part of being a shinobi?" He murmured something unintelligible. "Sorry, I didn't catch that." "Throwing kunai and shuriken." "Are you any good?" "Best in my graduating class." The corner of his mouth twitched up. "Know anything about Senbon?" "They're for wimps." "I'm hurt." He laughed once, but seemed to lose the energy to finish the noise. "Just because most kids idolize the habanero's big brother doesn't mean we all did." "Well, at least one of you has a brain." "I beat your scare in the accuracy test for the graduation exam." "If you say so." I couldn't stick around to look at the rankings. "Why don't you care?" "I didn't want to take the test." "Why didn't you want to be a shinobi?" he asked, baffled. "I didn't like fighting." "But you won the match against the chunin." "No one else could do that." "I'm perfectly capable of beating the snot out of any chunin who deserves it." "It doesn't mean I like it." "The rumors about you beating the Uchiha clan heir are true?" The Sharingan can't predict what it can't see. I can be sneaky if I want to. Enough about me. What do you want to specialize in? He shrugged, peeling my arm off his shoulders. Taijutsu, probably, and weapons. Why? What do you mean? I'm specializing in Iryo Ninjutsu because I don't want to fight. Why did you choose Taijutsu over everything else? My father started out with Taijutsu before he mastered anything else. So? Shut up, both of you, Danzo snapped. We're almost there. Well, before we go any further, do you understand what's going on and what can be expected, and how you are supposed to react? I asked him. Itsuki nodded shortly. Then let's take this by storm. Both sides retreated simultaneously, the Tsuchikage regaining his grip on my arm and dragging me away while a Jonin picked up Itsuki, not even trying to be gentle. The Hokages didn't even try to hide his emotions as Danzo grabbed his arms and firmly restrained him from acting. Within a minute, the entire contingent of IWA Nin had left their prisoners behind, incapacitated. I didn't close my eyes until we made it across the border into AIM, as strange as it sounded. I didn't dare close my eyes when I knew at least a half-dozen Konoha teams had to be trailing us until we passed beyond their patrol range. It wasn't until we crossed back into Earth Country that I allowed myself to fall asleep for most of the night, tightly wrapped with invisible defensive seals. Nothing living would be able to touch me while I slept, not even the tiny aberrane bugs that had camped out in the bottom of my pack, drawing on my chakra for survival. Itsuki had been unsurprisingly separated from me. My cooperation had been promised, so the closest anyone came to me was to hand me a small portion of the evening meals. It wasn't until we were in Earth Country that anyone spoke a single word to me. The IWA Nin were that much more comfortable on their own turf. It was a good thing silence never bothered me. When we reached the village, I was escorted to a separate entrance, blindfolded, by Iwa's version of ANBU while the others returned through the main one in a triumphant parade. When the blindfold was taken off, we were in a small apartment-like lodging. For your own safety, please do not leave your lodgings. It will be your quarters for the duration of your stay. The IWANBU respectfully exited the apartment. Tomorrow morning someone will escort you to meet with the Tsuchikage about your role here. The door closed. Cannon zipped around the lodgings once before landing on my head with a nanny cam in his beak. There's cameras everywhere. I didn't even know these things existed yet. It seems like IWA is holding out on us. Think it has a microphone inside? It can't be very powerful if it does, so stick it in the kitchen cupboard. You know that would tip them off that we know what this is. Konoha doesn't have cameras. I'll get them all and you can stick them in the kitchen drawer like junk. In comparison to what I had in my world, this is junk. But here, this is extremely high-tech. I could make them paranoid about what Konoha knows and set up all the cameras facing outside the apartment so they become my personal security. Cannon trilled in laughter. That would be hilarious, but considering Konoha still has to catch up with this, it wouldn't be wise to spur them so much further ahead. Go get the others, I said and wandered around until I found the kitchen and tossed it in the drawer, followed by at least 10 others from Cannon. What do you think they are? Cannon asked, sounding like a horribly staged question. They're not going to blow up, so just leave them in the drawer. If you ever feel like telling me what they're really called, I'll be waiting. With the technique that diminished my need for sleep, I wasn't particularly tired. After setting up seals that would paralyze anyone and block anything else that attempted to enter the room I slept in, I fell on the bed and released the summoning. Straight face. I woke up to someone banging impatiently on the bedroom door. For a moment, I was inexplicably disoriented. They tried the handle, and I managed to get to the door and jerk it open before they could let go and pulled them through the seal. I almost threw a brace of senbon at their companion waiting beside him when he put his hands up in surrender. Once I determined they weren't a threat, I released the seal and let the IWA Chunin fall on his face. What was that? The Chunin demanded angrily as he picked himself off the ground. I don't like people walking in while I'm trying to sleep, so I don't let them. Is it time to go? The Chunin's partner, who couldn't have been older than 15, stared at me in awe as he nodded. Self-consciously, I touched my forehead to make sure the bandages still covered it. It did, so I wasn't exactly sure what he was staring at. Since they were both standing in the doorway and made no motion to move, I turned on my heel and went to pick up my Chunin vest from the ground and pulled on my sandals. I wasn't very good at taking my shoes off at the door. Generally, they ended beside the bed when I took them off at night. I donned my sticks and medic pouch, picking up the Senbon pouch thoughtfully. I don't need those, I murmured and tossed it down on my bed, then dumped my bag out on top of it. Several scrolls tumbled out, most of which were filled with clothes, and I separated those, fishing out a scroll with the more complete medical set, which I attached to the small of my back above my sticks. Keeping my back to the door, I pulled off the bandages around my forehead, quickly finger-combed my hair, and replaced the bandages. I tied my forehead protector over it, pulled on my haori, and turned around, ready to leave. The teenage Chunin stared at me suspiciously. "What?" I demanded. The older Chunin sneered at me. "You're meeting with Tsuchikage-sama. Your point? Daimyo-sama will be there as well. Your point? Most foreign nin wear their formal clothes. I am not most foreign nin. I don't care if I step on the toes of a noble no matter how powerful. I'm here simply because IWA is using me to control Konoha, not to cater to the opinions of those who supposedly hold power." I crossed my arms and glared until they backed down. "Stupid human traditions," the Kyuubi said as we walked out of the apartment and directly onto the street. "Nice to hear from you. The younger ninja before you is the Jinchuriki of the Yonbi, who is sealed away beyond contact." "Thanks. Am I going to have a running commentary for this meeting?" I asked hopefully. "Not unless you insist on being as much of an imbecile as those around you, so shut up." "So, Jinchuriki-san, gonna share your name or?" He stiffened and yanked me out of the street and into an alleyway. I tripped with a yelp and landed on my butt as a rock wall appeared between us and the other Chunin. "Are you stupid?" he snarled in my face while I climbed to my feet. "I don't know how it is in Konoha, but the people here abhor Jinchuriki. So? Everyone knows who I am here. And my brother knows it. Does it not bother you when he was sneering at you? I'm pretty sure only my family and my sensei actually like me and they're the only ones who matter, so no, it doesn't bother me." He crossed his arms. "That's not how it works." I flinched as someone barreled into the rock wall, which had expanded to envelop us in a cube of stone that was somehow lit by a light with no origin. "Well, if they hate you because they can't get past the fact you have a giant chakra creature in your gut, they're not worth the effort it takes to see their idiocy." I responded stubbornly. "And I would love to talk to you about this, but I prefer it to be when there are people ready to take off my head for it." Another impact rocked the cube, and I grabbed a wall for support. The teen's shoulders slumped and the cube crumbled, showing at least a dozen and counting IWA nin about to attack. I barely managed to knock away a kunai from striking him at the last second. He must have been wound tighter than I thought, because somehow, illogically, the Yonbi's chakra started to leak out in a trickle and a rush. "You humans are idiots. Thanks for the vote of confidence. What the hell do I do now?" "Stop him. I can't do the 5-element seal unless someone pins him down and gets me some brushes and ink." "Then let me have at it." I closed my eyes and loosened the seal restraining the Kyuubi. "Kyuubi!" the Yonbi snarled through the teen. Chapter 30. I took off my haori, folding and stuffing it into my bag, then retied my hatae to completely obscure my hair color, hiding my sticks in my bag as well, replacing them with the bodkin I sealed into the hilt of one of the sticks and strapping that to my back in the same manner Sakumo wore his saber. There was nothing to reveal my identity to foreign ninja. About a quarter mile of walking later, 3 IWA Jonin materialized in front of me. I focused my paltry sensing abilities and felt the bare edges of the IWA camp ahead and to my right. Hello, Jonin-san. I'm Konoha's diplomat for the duration of these peace negotiations. Per the agreement made at the end of the previous war, peace negotiation must be made between two groups of equal numbers and rank. For the sake of the pretext of fairness and assuaging everyone's paranoia, I would like to request that the agreement in that respect be honored and that there be equal representation present. Just so there is no confusion, I am a Chunin, Shimura-san is a Jonin, Sarutobi-san is a genin, and Kage are considered to be in their own rank. Without a word, the Jonin melted away, at least visibly, and I watched them return to their camp through my chakra sense. What are you thinking? Danzo hissed at me as soon as they were out of earshot. Now they're going to return with prisoners, maybe the Hokage himself, and outnumber us. Keep up, Shimura-san, that was the idea. Little Sarutobi-san here just told us he has excellent aim. If worst comes to worst, he throws a bunch of kunai at our own men to free them and will be evenly matched. The idea is to have the Hokage here, because I don't have a lick of experience with this and I don't trust you to fulfill the contract. If anything goes south, you need to get him away as fast as you possibly can. I turned away from him and plopped down where I stood, crossing my legs. Cannon ruffled her feathers and settled onto my shoulder to wait, one eye never leaving Danzo. It only took a few minutes for the IWA delegation to arrive with 3 prisoners, the Hokage, the man I recognized as the Uchiha clan head, and, to my surprise, Tsunade. All 3 had standard Konoha prisoner seals on their chests, meant to prevent them from using chakra. Though Tsunade and the Uchiha were probably unable to break free of the seals, and thus were easily contained by the wire that bound their hands and feet, I knew the Hokage had to be capable of escaping it. The seal was only meant to contain Jonin and below, not S-rank Nin and Kage. By the nearly dead look of their extremities, all 3 of them would have significant damage to their hands and feet once the ropes came off. I ignored the Tsuchikage standing in front of me until I had assessed the number of people present as well as the condition of Iwa's prisoners. I wasn't entirely surprised when I finally recognized the man seething at my inattention to him. Inoki stood in front of me, his arms crossed. Have a seat, Tsuchikage-san, I have a feeling we will be here for some time, I invited politely. I apologize for the fact that there is no tea or refreshments to share, but as you can see, we are in the middle of a forest. If you would like, I'm sure Sarutobi-san would be able to find something. Who are you, boy? Inoki remained standing. I'm the person you will be dealing with when it comes to relations between Konoha and IWA. What is your name? You may call me Ryunosuke for now. Inoki stiffened at that before grinning. I suppressed a shudder of fear. I had a feeling I would regret using my father's name instead of a code or the most generic name in Fire Country. That is not your real name. No, it is not. I feared he knew exactly who I was. I would like to know who exactly I'm dealing with. With all due respect, Tsuchikage-san, there is a significant difference in strength between us. My rank is already far more information about myself than I am comfortable with giving out. On the off chance that you may be familiar with my name, I would like to preserve my anonymity. Inoki just smirked and accepted the statement. Do you have the authority to speak for your village? I have the authority to represent, speak for, and make binding agreements on behalf of my village. I inclined my head towards the Hokage, who nodded in confirmation. Considered Hokage-sama is currently compromised, my authority on village matters supersedes his. Uzumaki Kichiro, who is currently the head of the village, granted me the authority to hand back his authority when I see fit. You are only a child, and according to all reports, this Uzumaki Kichiro is only a young teenager. Translation: I see our information on you has been lacking. Continuing the veiled conversation would not do me any favors. I believe we have terms of a peace treaty to discuss. I see no reason to debate the workings and choices of my village leadership with an outsider. He gave a nod of respect and sat down in front of me. What do you know of the current situation? I think you have misjudged my character. I am not an individual who is eager to please. In our world, information is currency, and I've given as much as I'm willing to without proper compensation. That comment initiated a staring contest between us. After a few minutes, I felt his killing intent press down on me. I didn't react or retaliate. The Hokage shifted slightly, which broke the contest in my favor when the Tsuchikage glanced towards him in alarm. "What are your terms?" I asked, ignoring the Hokage's smirk. The seal tag on the front of his chest was slightly blackened around the edges, and the tiny bit of glowing that indicated an active seal was gone. There was a very small number of people who would be able to tell the difference between an active and inactive tag with only a glance. I didn't know how the hell the Hokage managed it, but the man in his place was now a clone disguised as a Jinjutsu. I was certain of it, especially when the slightly singed tag fixed itself. A quick glance behind me revealed that Tsuki was represented by a similar Jinjutsu. "I think you know exactly what I want," that Tsuchikage sneered at me. I refocused my attention back on him. "I think I know as well, but assumptions kill. I also think you have an idea of how much I am willing to yield." I was stalling, dragging the debate out for as long as possible. The Hokage deserved the time with his son, and I didn't want to leave Konoha. Inoki studied me for a long time. Or perhaps you don't, I don't care. Now, have you written up your demands or not? The rest of the encounter went around in circles until it ended up with the agreement Danzo informed me of to begin with. By the time that Tsuchikage and I signed the final document, the sun had fully risen and my nerves were wound so tightly I felt as though I was about to snap. Haggling my own safety and that of a child who may or may not have been watching the entire arrangement was, as of yet, the worst experience of my life, which was compounded by the fact it had dragged on far longer than it needed to. It was worsened by the fact that I knew the fate of the entire village hung in the balance. I knew there were more people watching than I could see or sense, and that was just the icing on the cake. "Now, Ryunosuke-san, you have promised me the Uzumaki boy. Where is he?" the Tsuchikage demanded with a smirk as we all stood. I closed my eyes and debated how to answer his question, not for his benefit but as a statement of strength to the IWA ninja. I was glad I still wore the bandages around my forehead to cover up the seal, similar to how most Branch Hyuga members hid their cursed seal. Slowly and deliberately, I untied my hatae to reveal my red hair, then retied it normally. "I am Uzumaki Kichiro." The IWA ninja blanched. One of the Tsuchikage's men whistled. "You got balls, kid." Inoki scowled at the man. I just felt sick, even though I valiantly tried to hide it. I was sure most people present picked up on it. The Hokage's clone dissipated into leaves and he materialized beside me, a hand on my back. It gave the IWA nin a fright, but I didn't even flinch, even though it startled me just as much. The Hokage pushed chakra through my Chunin vest and I felt it activate the seal tattooed over my right shoulder blade. It burned for a moment but quickly faded. "Do not die for me, boy," the Hokage hissed in my ear before looking up. The seal on my forehead twinged. The two Kage exchanged a look indecipherable to everyone else. I pulled my bag onto my shoulder, attempting to end the exchange as soon as possible. The treaty was signed and IWA had no reason to linger in the land of fire. It's been said I have an extremely poor sense of direction, but even I know you're facing the wrong way if you're heading back to IWA, I informed the Tsuchikage before a staring contest could begin and a fight could break out. I bit back the insult when the Hokage's grip tightened on my shoulder. "You had a good shinobi in the making." The Tsuchikage's hand tightened around my arm while he addressed the Hokage. I tensed as the Hokage's hand wrapped around my other arm. I was just a pawn in their power struggle, which was painfully clear to everyone present. By myself, I couldn't tip the scales one way or another, but I could make sure neither benefited. I jerked sharply out of their grips. "I believe this meeting is over. IWA has no reason to remain in the land of fire and Konoha has no reason to go back on their word." I untied the bodkin from my back and sealed it away, the most obvious motion I could make to tell everyone present to back down. The Kyuubi's chakra drew the attention of everyone present before I shut it down and stood there with my arms crossed. Both sides retreated simultaneously, the Tsuchikage regaining his grip on my arm and dragging me away while a jonin picked up Itsuki, not even trying to be gentle. The Hokages didn't even try to hide his emotions as Danzo grabbed his arms and firmly restrained him from acting. Within a minute, the entire contingent of IWA Nin had left their prisoners behind, incapacitated. I didn't close my eyes until we made it across the border into AIM, as strange as it sounded. I didn't dare close my eyes when I knew at least a half-dozen Konoha teams had to be trailing us until we passed beyond their patrol range. It wasn't until we crossed back into Earth country that I allowed myself to fall asleep for most of the night, tightly wrapped with invisible defensive seals. Nothing living would be able to touch me while I slept, not even the tiny aberrame bugs that had camped out in the bottom of my pack, drawing on my chakra for survival. Itsuki had been unsurprisingly separated from me. My cooperation had been promised, so the closest anyone came to me was to hand me a small portion of the evening meals. It wasn't until we were in Earth country that anyone spoke a single word to me. The IWA Nin were that much more comfortable on their own turf. It was a good thing silence never bothered me. When we reached the village, I was escorted to a separate entrance, blindfolded, by Iwa's version of ANBU while the others returned through the main one in a triumphant parade. When the blindfold was taken off, we were in a small apartment-like lodging. For your own safety, please do not leave your lodgings. It will be your quarters for the duration of your stay. The IWA-ANBU respectfully exited the apartment. Tomorrow morning someone will escort you to meet with the Tsuchikage about your role here. The door closed. Cannon zipped around the lodgings once before landing on my head with a nanny cam in his beak. There's cameras everywhere. I didn't even know these things existed yet. It seems like IWA is holding out on us. Think it has a microphone inside? It can't be very powerful if it does, so stick it in the kitchen cupboard. You know that would tip them off that we know what this is. Konoha doesn't have cameras. I'll get them all and you can stick them in the kitchen drawer like junk. In comparison to what I had in my world, this is junk. But here, this is extremely high-tech. I could make them paranoid about what Konoha knows and set up all the cameras facing outside the apartment so they become my personal security. Cannon trilled in laughter. That would be hilarious, but considering Konoha still has to catch up with this, it wouldn't be wise to spur them so much further ahead. Go get the others, I said and wandered around until I found the kitchen and tossed it in the drawer, followed by at least 10 others from Cannon. What do you think they are? Cannon asked, sounding like a horribly staged question. They're not going to blow up, so just leave them in the drawer. If you ever feel like telling me what they're really called, I'll be waiting. With the technique that diminished my need for sleep, I wasn't particularly tired. After setting up seals that would paralyze anyone and block anything else that attempted to enter the room I slept in, I fell on the bed and released the summoning. Straight face. I woke up to someone banging impatiently on the bedroom door. For a moment, I was inexplicably disoriented. They tried the handle, and I managed to get to the door and jerk it open before they could let go and pulled them through the seal. I almost threw a brace of senbon at their companion waiting beside him when he put his hands up in surrender. Once I determined they weren't a threat, I released the seal and let the IWA Chunin fall on his face. What was that? The Chunin demanded angrily as he picked himself off the ground. I don't like people walking in while I'm trying to sleep, so I don't let them. Is it time to go? The Chunin's partner, who couldn't have been older than 15, stared at me in awe as he nodded. Self-consciously, I touched my forehead to make sure the bandages still covered it. It did, so I wasn't exactly sure what he was staring at. Since they were both standing in the doorway and made no motion to move, I turned on my heel and went to pick up my Chunin vest from the ground and pulled on my sandals. I wasn't very good at taking my shoes off at the door. Generally, they ended beside the bed when I took them off at night. I donned my sticks and medic pouch, picking up the senbon pouch thoughtfully. I don't need those, I murmured and tossed it down on my bed, then dumped my bag out on top of it. Several scrolls tumbled out, most of which were filled with clothes, and I separated those, fishing out a scroll with the more complete medical set, which I attached to the small of my back above my sticks. Keeping my back to the door, I pulled off the bandages around my forehead, quickly finger-combed my hair, and replaced the bandages. I tied my forehead protector over it, pulled on my haori, and turned around, ready to leave. The teenage Chunin stared at me suspiciously. "What?" I demanded. The older Chunin sneered at me. "You're meeting with Tsuchikage-sama. Your point? Daimyo-sama will be there as well. Your point? Most foreign nin wear their formal clothes. I am not most foreign nin. I don't care if I step on the toes of a noble no matter how powerful. I'm here simply because IWA is using me to control Konoha, not to cater to the opinions of those who supposedly hold power." I crossed my arms and glared until they backed down. "Stupid human traditions," the Kyuubi said as we walked out of the apartment and directly onto the street. "Nice to hear from you. The younger ninja before you is the Jinchuriki of the Yonbi, who is sealed away beyond contact." "Thanks. Am I going to have a running commentary for this meeting?" I asked hopefully. "Not unless you insist on being as much of an imbecile as those around you, so shut up." "So, Jinchuriki-san, gonna share your name or?" He stiffened and yanked me out of the street and into an alleyway. I tripped with a yelp and landed on my butt as a rock wall appeared between us and the other Chunin. "Are you stupid?" he snarled in my face while I climbed to my feet. "I don't know how it is in Konoha, but the people here abhor Jinchuriki. So? Everyone knows who I am here. And my brother knows it. Does it not bother you when he was sneering at you? I'm pretty sure only my family and my sensei actually like me and they're the only ones who matter, so no, it doesn't bother me." He crossed his arms. "That's not how it works." I flinched as someone barreled into the rock wall, which had expanded to envelop us in a cube of stone that was somehow lit by a light with no origin. Well, if they hate you because they can't get past the fact you have a giant chakra creature in your gut, they're not worth the effort it takes to see their idiocy. I responded stubbornly. "And I would love to talk to you about this, but I prefer it to be when there aren't people ready to take off my head for it." Another impact rocked the cube, and I grabbed a wall for support. The teen's shoulders slumped and the cube crumbled, showing at least a dozen and counting IWA nin about to attack. I barely managed to knock away a kunai from striking him at the last second. He must have been wound tighter than I thought, because somehow, illogically, the Yonbi's chakra started to leak out in a trickle then a rush. "You humans are idiots. Thanks for the vote of confidence. What the hell do I do now?" "Stop him. I can't do the 5-element seal unless someone pins him down and gets me some brushes and ink." "Then let me have at it." I closed my eyes and loosened the seal restraining the Kyuubi. "Kyuubi!" the Yonbi snarled through the teen. The Kyuubi just manifested a mass of chakra around me and leapt forward, pinning the rapidly transforming Jinchuriki. "Be still," he ordered, and everything seemed to freeze. Something passed between the two Biju and the transformations slowly reversed until the Kyuubi left me with control of my own body and I stood up, leaning heavily against the alley wall. That was a very, very stupid thing to do, on the part of everyone present, I panted out. So, let's learn from our mistakes, to keep a hold of our tempers and paranoia, be nice to our comrades, and don't, for the love of all that's holy, attempt a Jinchuriki transformation for the first time in the middle of a populated area, even if it is only filled with grouchy IWA ninja. They just stared at me like I was insane, which I probably was. "I'm going to pass out, someone. Straight face." "Let go of the leaf child, Rashikuen," someone murmured pacifyingly. Another person's arm tightened around my torso and my heels dragged on the ground as whoever it was dragged me another step away, a blade at my throat. "No!" the person dragging me snapped. "I've had enough of your shit to last a lifetime, I won't take it anymore." This is no way to repay. I owe you nothing. You said I'd be a hero, but here I'm only despised. You said I'd be strong, but I'm not. You promised a lot of things, but not once have you delivered. I'm done with this. I was so glad I kept pre-made seals in my medic pouch. Before anyone realized I was conscious, I pulled one out and slapped it on the leg of the person holding me, grabbing the handle of the blade at the same time so it wouldn't slit my throat. Neck wounds were no fun to heal. They collapsed backwards and I landed on my hands and knees. Someone ran forward and Biju Chakra burned away the paralysis tag. Wind Prison Jutsu! I snapped and caught the Jinchuriki and the person running forward, lifting them into the air. They thrashed in their individual prisons, but otherwise everyone backed up as the Kyuubi assisted in containing the Yanbi's attempts to escape the prison. It was a good thing I didn't use hand seals and I probably looked like I was possessed. A fire jutsu won't get you out, I told the other nin as they started to run through hand seals. It'll just get blown around until it burns you up. Water will just end up turned to ice and slice you to ribbons, and earth jutsu will peel your skin off. I don't know what a lightning jutsu will do, but if you feel like seeing what happens when you're trapped with a bunch of electricity, feel free. He smirked and started a different set of hand seals. And in case you didn't know, I'm wind-natured and have a near-infinite supply of chakra. He tried it anyway. I assumed he attempted to blow a giant mass of wind in my direction, but it just blew all the air out of the prison. I compressed it so the person didn't blow themselves up through the lack of pressure. Cool! I didn't know it did that. I wonder if I could take the air out by myself. The trapped nin's eyes widened in horror. No experimenting with jutsu inside the village, Uzumaki. The Tsuchikige's voice snapped from behind the onlookers. They parted to reveal the Tsuchikige marching forward, furious, with what could only be the daimyo trailing behind him. He stopped in shock when he took in the situation. You are containing the Yanbi, he deadpanned. I glanced over at the trapped Jinchuriki. The Kyuubi had completely taken over that part of the jutsu. Yeah, that's not me, that's the Kyuubi. He ruined one of my seal tags, so I let his pissed off big brother take care of him. I probably look really demonic right now. Sorry about that, I promise I'm not crazy or possessed. The Tsuchikage crossed his arms as I focused on the wind prison to let air back in so the poor IWA nin didn't suffocate. Do you want me to let him go? Put the Yanbi back into its Jinchuriki. But I didn't take him out. Uzumaki. It's not my fault you have sucky seal masters here. Are you saying you're better? No, I just suck at Fuinjutsu and I know it. You're an Uzumaki. And you're stereotyping me. You have no respect for authority. None at all. Uzumaki. Do you just like saying my name or something? It probably wasn't very smart of me to turn on the smartass in front of the Tsuchikage, but he was asking for it. I don't blame you, it does have a ring to it, Uzumaki Kichiro, spirit. Let him go. The Tsuchikage pointed at the regular nin. I shrugged. Only if he promises not to attack me. I took a small step backwards and placed one foot over the fallen kunai, ready to fling it at the knees of someone in case I got in a pinch. With a nod of agreement, the Tsuchikage gestured for me to release him. I set the trapped nin on his feet before releasing the jutsu. Now, how can the Yanbi be secured? Shrugging, I silently turned the question towards Kurama, who didn't answer. I have no idea. Maybe get rid of whatever pissed them both off in the first place. I would think you would know how to handle your own shinobi better than me. I'm only 9 after all. I honestly thought he was going to strangle me for that comment. After a moment and a few waves of his hand, the shinobi backed up and spread out, picking up a few incapacitated civilians and lower-ranked nin on their way. You better figure something out quickly and very soon, because I don't think I can sustain this for very much longer. I'm 9 years old in case you've forgotten in the past few seconds, and I'm still trying to recover from the trip here. Besides, I shouldn't be using Biju Chakra for at least another few years. The few nin remaining were beginning to panic as a little bit of sense settled into their thick heads. I might have an idea, but it won't be pleasant. Make sure they don't kill you or the other Jinchuriki when I knock you both out for a few minutes. Well, you're in luck. The QB has an idea that might just solve all our problems. I'll say this once. Don't touch or move me or him. Sorry in advance about the roadblock, but it shouldn't take very long. The Yonbi seemed to pass out, briefly revealing the terrified teen before he too slumped. The QB's chakras snapped back inside of me and the jutsu broke. Ah hell, this is a bad day, I murmured as I passed out for the second, and hopefully last, time that day. That's the end of this tale for now. If you enjoyed, like the video. Subscribe if you'd like. Comment down below your thoughts, and with that being said, peace.